Are you tired of fighting the same old dragons over and over again? Wouldn't you rather fight a new family of dragons? Or better yet, wouldn't you rather play as a new dragon species in your 5e or Pathfinder game? Well, now you can. Roll for Combat, the creators of the incredibly popular Battlezoo Ancestries dragons, have done it again with Battlezoo Secret Dragons. This collection of 4 dragon books introduces new families of dragons to the world of 5e and Pathfinder. Now you can play as, or fight, the dragon you never knew you needed. Inside each book, players will find complete rules for playing as one of these new unique dragons, allowing them to unleash new abilities and powers never seen before. Meanwhile, GMs will find pages of monster stats, allowing you to pit these new creatures against your players. Each book features one new family of dragons filled with extensive, in-depth descriptions of their powers and abilities, background and history information, world lore, illustrations, and more to help you introduce these new dragons into your 5e or Pathfinder games. Experience the world of Battlezoo Secret Dragons through 4 new books. Fairy dragons are connected with the Fey realm and love to play pranks and cause mischief. That is, when they aren't conspiring with the courts of the Fae. Misfit dragons are hot, magical messes of magical energy, constantly shifting their physical forms, phasing in and out of existence, or simply releasing random wild magic effects. They're quite a handful. Leshy dragons are deeply connected to nature, allowing them to grow alongside different types of plants, fungi, and leshies. Oh yeah, and they're master chefs as well. And finally, the powerful battle dragons are obsessed with the thrill of combat. Battle dragons love hunting foes, dueling opponents, or commanding their legions to glorious victory. Head over to kickstarter.rollforcombat.com now to secure your copies of Battlezoo Secret Dragons and become the dragon you were always meant to be.
Hello, we're live.
Hi,
No more time to fool around with your audio, Linda, but you'll be fine. Don't worry about it.
That's all right.
Wow,
That's
Mark,
all right.
you are so close to the camera. It's nothing but face. You're so close, I can't even see your forehead or your chin.
That's just how this camera goes, the one that's on the computer.
Oh,
Linda
there you
has
go.
the normal one that zooms out more.
There you go. So everyone look at Mark's beautiful blue eyes.
Well, when we split
Here
things in
and there.
half, so Mark has the good microphone and I have the good camera, then get half good from each side.
half. We got half of Arcane Mark, or we got all of Arcane Mark, but half of the quality mics and audio.
Half of the quality.
Like all of the people, half the quality. I think that's the best way to.
That would be a not good tagline for selling something, but accurate.
So let me give you the overview, because this is what we're gonna do. I got Eve of Ruin, and I got both. Look at that! I even got the special edition.
Oh,
Special
hey,
edition looks great.
that looks really cool.
Like the
It's
cover.
okay, but the back of the special edition looks exactly the same as the special edition for Classic Creatures. Isn't that weird? Because
That is weird. Did you know that they were gonna have weird circles with things on it? Because
Same artist, maybe?
I did not.
No. It was just something I came up with, because I wanted to come up with a single back that we could reuse. So what we're going to do is, for our book, we have icons of all the creatures, so we have 12 icons. But then if we do like the dragon books, we'll just have 5 dragons, and so we can put whatever is in the icons representing the book. And
So weird.
The front
you
one,
can think of like a video game selection wheel where like, what do you want to be and things like that. So I think it's natural that multiple publishers would think of that sort of, hey, this looks like the thing you would do to say, I want to be this class, I want to be this class, I want to pick this option.
Well,
that's exactly what I told Steven when he showed me his mock-up. I was like, this looks like a rogue-like selection wheel in a good way.
So this, I believe, each one of these is parts of the 7 parts, and then the 3 inside are 3 main wizards you're you're hanging around with. And then I'm going to go through this. I read through the whole thing, and then I reread parts of it. This is a very interesting book, and the reason I wanted to have Linda on the channel today is that I'm going to go through real quick. So the lead designer for this book was Amanda Hammond, who both of you know very well and worked with at Paizo. And we all know Amanda. The other two designers, aka writers for this, were Patrick Rennie and Ron Lundeen, who happened to also write a little book called Jewel of the Indigo Isles, along with Linda Zayas-Palmer. And Stephen Glicker. So we're all here. If they're here in spirit, but we basically have the same team together, which is really amazing if you think about it. So if there's anyone who'll know this,
there's one other author, right?
There is one more, right? There's one more. There's also I don't know her, but and there's I think it's Mackenzie D'Arbs, and so I don't know her, but my point is that I actually was even, I think, sections I could figure out who wrote what just based on the sections. But I think we're in a very unique position because not only do we know the authors, or most of the authors, so 3 of the 4 authors, but they helped write this book. So we actually know how they write. And more importantly, Linda, how many adventures have you written and designed in your lifetime?
And developed.
If you had developed,
developed.
Okay, if you had developed, then we're definitely in the hundreds.
Okay, so yeah,
I don't know how far into the hundreds we are, but we're in the hundreds.
Hundreds and hundreds. And
I would guess in the 200s.
Probably in the 200s, yeah.
If not, then more likely the 300s than the 100s.
Now, what was your job at Paizo, so people know? Because part of this is I want to do a design. I want to do a review of the book, but the other part I want to talk about is design adventure principles and concepts, because I read this and it's really interesting how they set up this book, and they have a very different philosophy, and I wanted to discuss adventure design philosophy and how you set up adventures for society and how adventure paths are set up and how I set up our adventure and then how this adventure is set up. So what were you doing before this?
So when I started, I was working at Paizo. That was almost 10 years ago now. I was developing the Pathfinder Society Adventures. And Pathfinder Society Adventures are short form adventures, about 4 to 5 hours in length. And they are intended to be sort of any character can come in and participate style adventure. I did that for quite a while, and then I wound up being the manager for the production side of the team that makes all of the Pathfinder Society, as well as the Pathfinder Adventure Paths and the other adventures. So in that role, I had a lot of responsibility for teaching people how to develop adventures. And I've also written several of the longer form adventures myself, such as the 3rd part of Jewel of Indigo Isles and one of the parts of the first Pathfinder 2nd edition adventure path, Age of Ashes.
And Amanda wrote one of those parts too. And
yeah, she did. She was also on Age of Ashes.
Right. And
she wrote book 1, and Ron wrote one of the books of Ages of Ashes too.
Yeah.
She and I started at Paizo at the same time, actually.
Right. So that's why I wanted to bring you on, and I also have Mark here, obviously, because between the 3 of us, we have some background in adventures writing. So I wanted to break this video up to, first we'll talk about general news, and because we always do that first. But otherwise, I'll probably do a bookmark. So if you want to get right to the adventure and the review, we'll do the review. And then I'm going to also do one where we're going to talk about design philosophy. I'm going to warn people that this thing is going to be nothing but spoilers. So if you have any plans of having this run, it's impossible to really talk about this adventure in any detail without going through spoilers galore. So I'm just warning you that right now.
But that means if you're a GM, this is a great thing to check out.
Yeah, or if you're just interested and you're never going to run it or have it run for you, which I imagine most of the people here, not most, but I know there's a lot of Pathfinder people who will probably never run this, so they're just interested. And I also wanted to talk about design philosophy of adventures, because this is fascinating. And I know you didn't read it. Neither of you have read this yet.
Stephen, you're the only one who was able to get it yesterday on the early day. You went to your local game store.
Yeah, Complete Strategist, actually, in Manhattan. I went all the way down to Manhattan to get this thing. So, anyhow, with that, don't forget, do like and subscribe. And if you saw, there was an ad for dragons, because we actually have, I don't know how long we're going to do it for. I think just a little bit longer. Is that we have, basically the backer kit has this new thing they just started like a few weeks ago, where you can do late pledges. So if you want to get dragons galore at huge discount prices, you can still for a little bit longer. But I'm going to close it because I can't really start the backer kit and getting everything together until the Kickstarter closes for good.
Oh, okay.
You can, but it's a little complex. So it's one of those catch-22s. So we can keep it open, but only for a little bit longer. And to be honest, I was just curious. I just wanted to see how it worked. And we got enough pledges to get another stretch goal. So there we go. I just want one more pledge. We're up to 1,499 backers. Come on, one more. I'll shut it down. I just want 1,500 and then I'm done. So just pledge and then it'll be over.
One more chance. Will it be
more.
you?
I can't stop it at $14.99. It'll drive me crazy. Well, one of our others stopped at $12.99 and it always drove me nuts. I'm like, come on, one more.
Do you report that to people as $12.99 or do you say $1,300?
I say 13. I just round up. It's D&D. You round up, right? So,
exactly.
There you go.
I thought you usually round down in D&D.
You do, but in mine you round up. Anyhow,
okay.
that's
let
totally
him
fair.
have this, Mark. Let him have it.
And something you round up. I'm sure there's something out there you round up.
Once your number is that big, you're fine.
You're close. How much more do you want? All right.
What are you going to defeat with 1,300 damage that you didn't defeat with $12.99? Right.
Yeah, that's actually a very good point. So we go through our mini topics. All the mini topics are WotC and D&D related. Okay, how about that? Except for maybe
this week.
Except for maybe one or two. But they're mostly there. So let's go through. I have, first of all, is that there is a really good sale for D&D products if people are interested. I know this is like not directly related, but I saw this and I was like, damn. I was like, this is a good sale. So if you go to Amazon, they have, and this is probably going to keep happening because now the new edition's going to come out, but they have, like the Essentials kit is $20, the Player's Handbook's $42, Monster Manual's $29, and this is for the hardcover. The one I was actually very interested in is Spelljammer. I didn't get it at the time because it was $70, but now it's $39, and I've heard it's terrible, but I'm very interested. At $39, I was like, okay, maybe I'll get it now. But Candlekeep Mysteries, which people love, is $26. Icewind Dale, which is good, $28. Strixhaven, I heard it's all right. I heard it's mixed. It's $27. Mythic Odyssey of Theros is $34. That's actually a good one. So there's some really good deals.
It looks like the biggest sales are the Spelljammer through Strixhaven ones.
Yeah, there's a lot of good sales. So if you've been on the fence like me, because like I actually wanted this, I love Spelljammer. I really wanted to see it, but the reviews were so bad. I couldn't put down $70 on that thing. I just couldn't, even though I literally have everything. But that's the one I don't have, and I just couldn't do it. But it, the weird thing is the Amazon reviews. It has 4.5 stars. So who do you believe? Do you believe Amazon or I don't know? But
that's interesting. Mr. Blawface made it 1,500.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe I have to shut it down then.
There we go. Congratulations, Mr. Blawface.
No, it's still up to $14.99.
Mine just showed it changing to 1,500.
Oh, it just changed to 1,500.
There you go. Hit the refresh button.
I'm gonna get an extra one just for good luck. Well, because last time, because sometimes it does disappear one. So I want to make sure, because I've seen that happen where it like disappears.
Yeah, I see. And Charlie, everything in Amazon has 4.5 stars, pretty much, unless it's like a literal physically defective product.
Yeah. So that's just a mini thing. Next, we already talked about this. D&D is going to release its 2024 rule set under Creative Commons. We had a big topic about this on Monday. I just wanted to talk about it real quick if no one caught that, but they're going to release their core rules in 2025 for D&D. I think people are unofficially, Mark, calling it 5.2 because the SRD is 5.2. And I've been hearing people.
I mean, that's not a bad name for it.
Yeah, I've been hearing people call it 5.2 because the SRD is 5.2 and it's still 5th edition. So was it 5.1? That was 5.2. So that might become the unofficial official name. But I've been hearing that because some people call it D&D 2024. No one's calling it remastered. Some people call it 6th edition. Some people.
I thought wotc was calling it D&D 2024 themselves.
They are.
So to be clear to everyone, this is news in the sense that, D&D just posted about it, but is not news in the sense that this is literally what they said that they were going to do at the end of the controversy, and they're just reaffirming the exact same thing that they're doing it, which is a good thing. It's a very good thing, and I say that if you watch the other video. But it shows that a little bit that I guess the bar is lower in that how excited we got. And I got really excited to see them posting that they agreed to do the thing that they already said that they were going to do. I'm very happy about it, especially that they intentionally added that they're behind and haven't done anything on the older edition. SRD is going to Creative Commons, but they are going to work on it afterwards, which they didn't have to do that. They could have just not mentioned it because that wasn't something they'd been working on, but they chose to bring it up. So I thought it was a really good update.
No, it was a very good update. And they put out a nice FAQ, and yeah, it's good. It's good. They're starting to turn the corner. And I know a lot of people are like, never trust them again, never trust them again. But Cynthia Williams is gone. They don't have a new president yet, and the president can really affect a lot. And I was actually I won't get into this, but I was talking to someone yesterday who was telling me some inside dirt and was also saying morale's like really low, and it's just there's a lot going on right there. So I think they need to turn the ship around and make things positive, not just for us, but for them. Because I've been hearing like people are just bummed out so many because it was just bad news after bad news, and who wants to work there? Who wants to work?
I hope they can get good news.
Yeah, for sure.
Wow. I mean,
I'm sure for all the creative folks working there and making the content, they're just like, oh man, another corporate whatever just happened, and
it's just brutal. It's too much. So that's good.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see. With that, here's the more interesting one, and this I think was also good news. And as I said, it's all D&D all the time. They put out their generative AI art FAQ. Dungeons and Dragons put out a long FAQ basically detailing their policies around AI art. And it is very reasonable and makes complete sense. And it basically says that they do not support AI art. They do not want AI art in their products. However, they will not address every single time someone says, hey, there's AI art in something. What are you going to do about it? That's something they said. They're not always going to address everything. They're also going to say that they do their best. However, and this is true, and this is becoming a very, very, very big issue. And you're going to hear this more and more. So right now, most companies and people get their art from Adobe or other companies that sell art. So if I want to get art of a picture of a woman in her 40s wearing a cowboy hat crying, you got two options. You can either go hire a model with that and spend thousands of dollars taking that picture, or you can go to Adobe Art, type in those keywords and find it and pay like $100 for the rights for that image for an ad, or you can use AI art to generate it if you can't find it. Those are really your only three options. 99% of most people do the second option, which is they just go to Adobe Art, find what they need, or one of the other million art houses out there, and then pay for it, and then get commercial rights to use it. Everyone does it. It's very common. Almost all the art you'll find is from these art houses. The thing is, anyone can make art and put it on there, and now a very large part of that art is AI art. And it's going to only get harder and harder to get art that's not AI art. And what people do is that basically anything before like the year 2021 or 22, you can pretty much guarantee is regular art. But now, starting the last couple years, it's getting harder and harder to find things that just aren't AI art. let's fast forward 2 or 3 years from now, it's going to be like all AI art. And they're saying that, look, we're going to do our best, but we have ad agencies, we have partners, we have people that we do not have control over because we are a Fortune 500 company, and they might use AI art for something of ours, and we can't control that. And we will do our best and put in our contracts for them not to do that, but there's only so much we can do. And I actually think that's very realistic.
So I want to read the last thing.
Yeah, sure.
In this FAQ, because I read through it while you were saying that.
Pontificating?
Very long and interesting sentence about it. And I feel like it's a fantastic point that they put in here, not just by our lowered bar of like they did what they said, but it just was really well written. And I it's a point that I've made on this show several times. They said at the end, if there's only one takeaway I should have from this FAQ, what should it be? And their answer was, human beings are fallible, whether it is a conglomerate of human beings like a company or a single human being like an artist. In the tension between perfection and transparency, we have erred on the side of transparency. As stated throughout, we have been consistent in our position with respect to generative AI and magic and D&D art. We want our community to know that we're working to ensure that they see us deliberating on how best to meet that commitment, even if we all occasionally stumble along the way. I thought that was very good. And it points out that a company is not one person and is kind of doing things and can stumble over each other.
Yeah, I mean, they're basically saying this might happen, and we're doing our best. And I think they're going to be the first of many, many, many companies to start putting out very similar FAQs, because unfortunately, it's becoming too big and out of control that it's just going to happen, and it sucks, and I know a lot of people are upset about it, but to think it's realistic that you can never ever use AI art going forward, it's going to be impossible. I mean, it's just not going to happen. It mostly has to do with the tool sets and the resources that people use, and a lot of those resources use AI art. So it's going to inevitably happen one way or the other. So
it's going to slip in no matter how hard you try to keep it out. And it's not because of a secret nefarious intention where there's a conspiracy that's like, let's put in as much AI art as we can.
Yeah, I mean,
it's not.
Any company is going to be working with a broad range of artists and trying out a lot of new artists, giving more people a chance to show their stuff. And you never know, like there's going to be ones who slip in there and they do something that, at least to your brand standards, crosses a line. And I think also everybody's going to have a different standard of how much is too much for AI involvement in art. Like, you know, if you used AI for some portion of an image, is that an AI image or is it your image?
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting to watch that debate unfold.
Yeah.
In the years to come.
Well, I don't even think it's going to be a debate. I think like everything else in this world, you're just going to get used to it, and no one will know, and they'll be just part of the culture, one way or the other. Actually, also what will happen is the AI art will get so good you won't be able to tell the difference anymore. You know, kind of like there's so much special effects in movies now that half of the time you can't even tell what is the special effects and what isn't. Last up is, and it's not a WotC, is that Paizo is releasing the Starfinder 2E playtest adventure Cosmic Birthday on August 1st. Hold on a second. My dog wants to go out. You guys can cover this one quick.
Which is close to my birthday. So my birthday isn't quite a cosmic birthday, but almost.
Anyhow.
They also today, Stephen, released a like mini encounter playtest in their field test number 5 as well.
Well, anyhow, the point is that
it's not a whole adventure. It's just like a couple. If
you want to try out the Starfinder 2E playtest adventure, it comes out August 1st, and I think I don't know.
Oh, it's by Jenny too. Jenny Jarzowski.
Oh yeah, Jenny's doing it.
Awesome.
The thing about this is that like
that was mentioned a few weeks ago, I think.
It was, but it came out. It came out as an official post on May 6th. So I think it was like unofficially announced, but then they came out with like official announcements. I personally like.
It may have been on Paizo Friday.
Maybe. I personally like to read the adventures more than even the books, because it's like reading the books is like reading stereo instructions, because it's like, here's how the players work, here's how the GM. I'm like, okay, I get it, but how does it work in action? And I like to see the adventure. I like to see the actual, it's like eating an egg and flour and water and sugar as opposed to a cake. Like, I don't want to eat individual pieces. I want to eat it all together. I want a cake. And that's the cake. The adventure is the cake. And speaking of adventure cakes, let's go to the main topic, because that's all I got. Ta-da. All right. So, are you...
do you want to cover the somewhat related topic?
Yeah. I forgot about that one topic. Yes, you can.
Which is that so, and people asked for this in the chat, so we should point out that there has been a bit of a controversy about Vecna Eve of Ruins early access, which was promised in many press related publications and on certain pages as well in the marketplaces, but not others, apparently, that it would be offered to everyone who bought a digital version. In some the places they changed it or put up that it had to be digital plus print. In some places also that you had to have done it before a certain date. People in all of those spectrums, including ones who ordered it before that date, were not getting the pre-order, and at least they were trying to talk about it, and moderators were saying like not to talk about it. And so it was an unusual situation that happened here. My guess is, just as always, when you have a company, it's not just a few people that's a press release to all those press outlets that said that it would be counted. Probably heard one thing, or they were just doing what normally was done, because it said that just like always for D&D Beyond, we're going to give you this benefit. And then someone doing the tech with the new marketplace or something was like, oh yeah, we're going to change it. And they didn't tell the other side. I don't think it was
You're breaking up a lot, Mark,
like,
by the way.
Any kind of secret conspiracy to be like, haha, let's not give them the thing. It would be an unforced error that like may force them to refund people, and that's not what they want. It's not. It seems to me it's obviously a mistake that happened by accident.
By the way, you're breaking up a lot right then. So, but very long story short, it looks like people in America mostly were not getting. If you pre-ordered it, the PDF / not the PDF, if the D&D Beyond, and there were some people that were complaining that took off work and they were so excited and they just didn't get it, and they paid $70, and they're like, what the heck? It's like, you advertised this, I'm not getting it, and I took off work, or I was very excited, and now I got to wait 2 or 3 weeks. And not only that, there were some people complaining and then getting their posts removed because they were, quote, complaining. So it's like, oh,
some were also professional GMs who signed up in advance to have a group that started on it.
Yeah, and I didn't even think about that. If you're a professional GM and you're you're taking money to run this early, and people are very excited, I mean, you can't just do this, Wizards. Okay, I was like, I don't know what happened. I don't think it was done on purpose. I don't think it was nefarious, but you got to fix it. And I don't know if they've been fixing it. From what I've been hearing, they haven't yet. And I think it has to do something with them changing the structure for the individual, buying the individual pieces of the pieces from the books. And it sounds like it's a back end issue. It sounds like, I don't think they were doing this on purpose. I think something broke on the back end and they're trying to fix it. I actually think personally, I think that's all that really happened.
I agree.
So
I'm sure it's a mistake. In some place, it's a mistake. Even if somebody intended to do it, it's a mistake that they didn't talk to other people and communicate and make a decision across the company.
So if you're one of those people, let me know if you didn't get it. And I've been hearing people are pretty pissed, as I would be too. That's why I didn't chance it too. I was actually going to do that, but I weirdly had a suspicion. So I pre-ordered it and went to go buy it. And there you go. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, dun, dun. So we've never done this before. I've never done a review of a D&D module. And the answer is, why? Why, Steve? Why are you doing a D&D review? Well, I'll tell you why. First of all, I know Amanda did this because Amanda and I were talking about this at last Gen Con. That's how long ago they wrote this. And so she was telling me a little bit about the adventure. So, and I wanted to see what she wrote. That's the first reason. The second is my favorite adventure of all time is Age of Worms. And Age of Worms is the greatest adventure ever written. And not only is it the greatest adventure ever written, by far, but it has the greatest first intro adventure ever written by Eric Mona, no less, which is interesting. But it is the intro from 1 to 4 is so well done. The Whispering Carn is excellent adventure. I think he really just perfect in every way, shape, and form. Fantastic. And what it made the Age of Worms, I actually interviewed Eric Mona, who managed and was the producer for that adventure. It took you from levels 1 to 21, 22. You actually went above 20 in that, in 3.5 for Dungeon Magazine. And he said that they thought that was going to be the last adventure, perhaps the last. It was the second adventure path ever written, but it really was the first modern adventure path because the Shackled City was sort of the very first one. But that one, they were still figuring out how to do an adventure path. But then they kind of got it down with Age of Worms. It's 12 adventures taking you from level 1 to 20-ish. You are basically to kill a god. And Eric said, all right, let's just put in every cool thing ever in the world and history of D&D in one adventure. And oh boy, did they. It is nonstop. Like, just take the 100 coolest things in D&D, and it has like 98 of them. It has everything. It's very cool. It's like, oh, does I'm doing some spoilers here. It's like, oh, one of your parties gets abducted and replaced with the doppelganger? Yep, that's in there. Oh, you're fighting in the city of Greyhawk against a rival adventure gang where you have to, fight in the Greyhawk games? It's got that. It's like, you name it. It's got everything. It's just, you get, oh, Hand of Vecna? Sure, you get that. You get everything. Rod of 7 Parts? Yep, you get that. It's got it all. It's fantastic. So, I felt that this was going to be a very similar adventure because this is going to be one of those, we are going to go around and we're going to see all the coolest things ever. We're going to go and see the greatest hits. So I felt, this is going to be kind of like an Age of Worms. So I was very excited. And plus it's adventure for levels 10 to 20, which D&D never does. So the first thing I'm going to say is I'm going to start talking about spoilers very soon. I will give a very, very general overview, and then it's going to be nothing but spoilers. Now, neither of you have read it, so feel free to ask me questions, and I can go into it, and I'll explain.
Yeah, I'll ask for follow-ups or clarifications as sort of the audience avatar of I don't know what this is going to say.
Yeah, and also, if anyone here has any questions, feel free to ask them. If you do super chats, I'll answer those first. And then I wanted to also talk about general adventure design. So it'll probably be me talking in the beginning, but then we'll get into the meat of it because I want to explain how this adventure is set up, why they set it up this way, and then we'll get into sort of the design philosophies around it. So here's the very first thing: is you are trying to stop Vecna. Vecna is going to try to unmake the universe, and a lot of people know this ahead of time, so it's not really a big spoiler. You're level 10. Although there are rules in here, if you start at level 8 or 9, or maybe even 7, they sort of tell you how you could start, which is a little weird, and I'll explain why in a second. And then you have to find the Rod of 7 Parts, and you have to find all parts of the Rod of 7 Parts, and use it to stop Vecna. The cool thing about the Rod of 7 Parts is that it used to be called the Rod of Law, and in a final fight, I forgot which fight it was, but it was destroyed in some epic battle. And, excuse me. Yeah, sneezing. Is that it was destroyed and flung across the multiverse. And each part can sense the next part. So if you have the first part, it can sense and know where the second part is, and so forth. And part 1, I believe, is the weakest part, and then it goes on. And in fact, in Age of Worms, you get the 7th part of the age of the Rod of 7 Parts. And there's a demon lord who has the 6th part, and then he comes after you. in that adventure, which is awesome.
Is it Mishka, the wolf spider, the one who was the one who originally shattered the
might
rod?
have been Mishka who comes after you. Doesn't come after you directly, just sends minions, and then you go and hang out with which famous you go not Tasha. Oh, name some of the other famous
there are a lot. What letter does it start with? If it's T like Tasha, it could be Tensor.
Oh, Tensor. It's Tensor. So you go to Tensor and you literally say, "Hey, Tensor, can you hold on to this rod for me?" And he's like, "Sure, I'll defend against those nasty beings." So that's like, just give you an idea how cool that is. So I was very excited. So the MacGuffin is you got to find this rod, and going through and finding the rod, you're going to go to 7 cool universes and do cool adventures. So that's actually a pretty good hook. Now we're just going to talk about spoilers because there's nothing I can really talk about without doing it. Okay, that's it. So here we go. Now I already had a bad feeling about this adventure. I think it's good overall, but it has some really strange design issues, and I just think it's just a philosophy rather than the ability. Because we know these people and we know what they can do because 2 of them wrote my own book, so I know what they can write. So
Stephen, are you thinking
I have a question, Stephen.
Yes.
How many pages do they have to go up that many levels?
This is where it gets, so it's 1 level per chapter, and the adventure is only approximately, it's 202 pages, but it doesn't start until chapter, let's see, chapter 2. So
there's a lot of background in the
not
beginning.
Even that much. It starts on page, oh my god, are you ready?
Okay.
It's the adventure where you really start adventuring. Starts on page 48.
Okay, so there's only like 150 pages to go up.
Yes.
You said
10
10
levels?
to 20? So that's 11 levels if it's 10 to 20 and not 11 to 20.
So that's a very good, perfect example. That's why I wanted you here, Linda.
It sounds like Peach Space.
So they're gonna have to be making some really tough decisions here about what kinds of encounters they can present.
Right.
Because there's a lot of longer form encounters that just won't fit in that kind of thing. Complex social encounters and things like that without trimming things down a lot. They're also not going to have as much room in something like that to introduce a lot of new custom bespoke stat blocks. They'll need to have more reliance on existing encounters, formats, monsters, that sort of thing. That's the first thing that comes to mind when I hear what page space they're working at.
Well, here's interesting. Yeah. The bestiary it starts on page 204. It ends on page 255.
Oh, wait. So the adventure is only 100 pages?
No.
Yeah, that's not...
150 pages.
No, because the first 40, almost 50 were background and the adventure didn't start yet. And the last 50 was the bestiary.
No. It's the whole book itself is 256 pages. Page 48 to 203 are adventure.
Oh, okay. So it is 150 pages of adventure.
204 to 255 are stat blocks.
Okay, because if they only had 100 pages, which it sounds like they did have 150 to do 11 levels, I was like, how do you even possibly do that?
So that's the first issue. And they have a big font. So I've read this. I really want to know the word count on this. This, Jewel of the Indigo Isles, what's the word count on this, Linda?
Gosh, I don't know the whole thing. The part that I wrote was well over 100,000.
Right. So you wrote one part over 100. This is 250,000 words for this adventure. And this also takes you from levels 1 to 10, 11 really, but 10.
Or you get to 11 at the end, so it's the same number of levels.
Same number of levels, but how many pages are in Jewel of the Indigo Isles?
420, I think.
and also it's the lower half of the level range instead of the upper half of the level range, and it's much faster to do encounters for low level characters than it's for high level characters.
Yeah And I use actually a smaller font and deeper. I use a smaller font and a much tighter text, so that's another thing.
So if as it's sounding like you were saying there that this may be like good at the core but having certain things that you don't understand in decisions, word count may be the answer to those decisions.
Oh, it definitely is. No, it's 100% that. And I just don't understand why you do that, because you have the pages and they've done bigger adventures before, and you would think if there's anything they want to splurge on and add the extra, like I feel like this adventure, if they just had an extra 40 to 50 pages, its thing would be really good. But right now I almost read this and it feels like a skeleton of an adventure, and I'm just in parts, not the whole thing, but in parts.
I mean, Vecna is a kind of a skeletonish guy,
Yeah,
but
well, here's the thing.
Steven, I think the answer to that question is company pressures. Okay, so they had their team that was working on a new edition. And that means that the ones who are working directly on building the edition would have had a lot of their attention taken to that. So they brought in new team members. Some of those team members were keeping upkeep on the various products that needed to come out up to this new 2024 edition, or partial edition revamp. You know what I mean. And so basically, it may be the case that project management or someone calculated the bandwidth and just said, we don't have the bandwidth. And maybe the team on Vecna Eve of Ruin said, give us another designer or two, because we could really use another 50 pages. And maybe they said, we can't give you that many people, and therefore this is the number of pages it's going to be. Right.
So then you have to make a decision as the manager in that sort of position. I say from experience of, do you throw out the idea because you say, this idea is awesome, I want to do this idea. I can't do that idea in that many pages. I have to do something else. Or do you find a way to adapt the idea, and then it's maybe not ideal because it's shorter than you like, you can still do it. And especially if the product has already been previewed or announced in any places, then sometimes your hands can be tied. Especially if you have less resources than you thought you would right from the beginning. Those are just some guesses based on my personal experience on where that sort of thing might come from.
Well, here's what happens. So, I'll give you an idea. Here's the event. So we're starting the adventure. We're going to sit down. I'm going to read you the text. Are you ready?
Okay. So we were just starting. You're going to read the first box text to
us. The adventure you're in Neverwinter. Lord Dalgo Neverember summons you. I might mispronounce these names. And he brings you to his house. And he looks at you and smiles and says, "Greetings, my heroic friends. I'm so glad you came. I dare say terrible events are afoot. Specifically, 4 prominent citizens have been kidnapped in the past several days. May I count on your help to rescue them?" That's it. That's the event. That's it. I was like, that's it. That's the intro to this epic adventure. I didn't leave anything out. That's the whole thing.
He is a major lord, I guess, so you are getting to see him right away, but it doesn't make it completely clear what you're dealing with. Sometimes the mystery is what you're dealing with, and you don't know right when you start.
This is it. That's the whole intro.
I'm curious if the adventure in those earlier pages has some guidance for the GM about how to hook the players in, and that's expected to be more like a session 0 thing, or if there's a player's guide or something like that.
Not really. What they do is they basically just say, here's the summaries. There's some new systems. They're going to explain what the maps are, and it really just says that you should either have new characters, and they should be 10th level, or you have existing characters that just meet with him. And then you have to go rescue 4 people. And I was like, okay. I mean, it just seems...
Is that where you discover that, Vecna is involved with this?
So now you go to a graveyard where the 4 people are... This is interesting. It's a prelude adventure. So what happens is you go to a graveyard, and you are fighting some cultists. And the one thing that I did like this, which was funny. In the graveyard, the wandering zombies and skeletons of Never Death Graveyard don't pose a challenge to the higher level party, so the characters can reach the Halleck's Mausoleum without much trouble. I was like, I do like that. They just brush over there's a skeleton, kill it. There's a zombie, kill it. I was like, okay, that's funny. I like that. That was funny. By the way, okay. Wizards, you have to stop doing this. They hyphenate. First, they have what's called ragged right, so they don't have justified columns. They have ragged right. They still use hyphenates hyphenated words. You don't need to hyphenate if you're using ragged right. You have room. And they're hyphenating, they do this all the time. They're hyphenating proper nouns. It drives me insane. The very proper.
You mean the Tolkien hyphen? Where you just like take two words in a proper noun and put a dash hyphen in between, or do you mean hyphen and then cutting off to the next line?
They cut off the actual, like, never death has a hyphen. Never death graveyard, capitalized proper noun. Why are you hyphenating that? And then the very next one, the Halleck's Mausoleum. There's no hyphen in there. I'm like, of all the things you hyphen in that paragraph, they're proper nouns, and they do that everywhere. It drives me insane.
So you're saying that, again, they cut off in the middle of line because it's at the end of line with a hyphen, or that they just the proper name for it is never hyphen dash anywhere?
There's not a dash in the name. They're just they
okay, it's only with it ended the line. I understand now.
They just put hyphens.
Because I could see a situation where they Tolkien hyphen never and death.
No, trust me. They just do it, and it drives me crazy. And you're talking to someone who yesterday was spending hours making sure that if it says one hit point or 5 gold pieces, that I make sure they're together. Like, I never have it go on 2 lines. It drives me crazy. So I'm like, and they do this everywhere, and it really takes me out of it because I'm like, oh.
So Tillers in chat had a super chat. They made a point that said it's already €75 in the EU for the book in PDF. If they were to add more pages because they needed more page count, no one would buy the book because it would be too expensive. That's what Tillers said.
Yeah, but
I saw a comment above that too from Lava Being that was a question directed at Stephen. If Stephen could clarify if changing your page count to increase pages after a product is announced can cause business problems besides the production and shipping costs.
Depends who you tell, and it depends. It's one of those, because it doesn't matter. In the end, it doesn't really matter the size of the book. What matters is the weight of the book, and that even really doesn't matter that much. I have a feeling that they just wanted this book to be 256 pages, and at this price point, because it is, let's see, how much is it? It's $60, and I have a feeling that it would have been 70 if they made it a little bit bigger. But so what's the issue? Like, you hyphen line break a personal name like Jerusalem. Yes. That's it. You don't need to hyphenate because they have so much extra space. They do something called ragged right, which is they don't have it, it's not justified on the right side. If you do ragged right, you don't need to ever hyphenate because it's not lined up. So there's no reason to do hyphenations in any WotC book, not just this one, but any. Okay, it drives me insane. Anyhow, that's just a personal thing. So you go to this mausoleum, and here we go. Here's the next thing. Look at that map.
That map looks really, really crisp. It has that old school feel.
But that's the thing. It's black and white. But then I'll show you. And then I'll show you this map. It's like, why?
So the prologue is more old school. Does it take place in the past, and then there's a time jump?
Nope.
Because that could be a kind of cool.
Nope.
I'm also wondering, now that you've told me that first part is a prologue, this isn't as common in higher level adventures, but there is a philosophy with low level adventures, and when you're just starting people out, that it can be very valuable to have adventures that have incredibly easy to understand hooks that you explain in 2 seconds, and then they play a little bit, and then they go into the main adventure, and then things are more complicated. So when that's a design philosophy that comes into play when designing like demos and a lot of intro adventures for new players, where you're like, all right, you're not going to use proper nouns, you're not going to use any of this fancy stuff, you're going to have the really basic, really troporific, you can explain it in 3 seconds, people got kidnapped, save them, type stuff. So I do wonder if that's what they were going for, if it was like a prologue to the main adventure, and then there's like another bigger introduction that happens later.
Kind of throwing you right in the action. Sometimes that's the advice for adventures, because if you instead were like telling all the secrets of the plot with Vecna that was like 6 paragraphs at the beginning, you can lose players sometimes because they're not thrown directly into the action. They have to learn all these proper names if they didn't grow up in D&D with all of them.
So here's what I think happened. So they're right. Dyson, this one author, he did most of the maps. And he did about half of them. And he does these black and white crisp maps. I actually think I know why they did it, which is kind of weird. So you see this map? This is a map that appears later. It's called the Death House. This map has appeared and was in a past adventure. And I think, and I could be wrong, but they basically reused the exact same map from a prior adventure, which is in black and white. And they might have even said, okay, we have two choices. We can either make all the maps in color and redo the Death House in color, or we do the dice in black and white map, and then we're going to have to make half of the maps in the book black and white to make it match an existing map, but then half in color. But it's like, well, why'd you do half and half? Like, there's no rhyme or reason. There's no rhyme or reason. Some of them are black and white and some are in color. They just are. It's a little strange. That's all I'm saying.
So it's not about like, this type of building is in black and white versus this one's in color. I wonder if it was just a matter of like, we have two artists for the maps. We're going to send some to one artist and some to the other artist, and the two of them will come together.
Yeah, but I personally wouldn't do it that way myself, because it's just a strange decision that the maps are just sort of all over the place. Is that they're like, some are, it's a little odd. I'll leave it at that. It's and of all the things is that I was looking forward to some big, colorful, beautiful, gorgeous maps, especially if you're doing this high level adventure, and then you see these, and they're clean, they're old school, but I kind of like the Blando maps, the maps that we have, like a lot of color, a lot of details, a lot on there, like epic.
Well, those maps are gorgeous.
Yeah,
it's being able to see like adventure content that I've written illustrated like that is so gratifying as an author.
Yeah, it's a minor thing. I'm just curious about that. So anyhow, you go through it, and sure enough, who captured these people is the Cult of Vecna. And the weirdest part is these kidnapped people, when you find them, is like one of them is just sleeping and is like, "Oh, don't disturb me." I'm like, "What?" I was like, did someone read this? It's like they're just like, don't worry about it. Yeah, these people are gonna kill me, but I'm just. Do you mind if I keep resting? It's like literally the first person you find. They're just like, I'm just coming here. I'm just hanging out. It's like, here it is.
Are they confident they can escape on their own?
I don't know. What? It's like this old crypt holds a single open coffin containing a few tattered blankets. A puff of wild magic hair sprouts from the end of one of the blankets, and they put one of their intended ritual victims, and she's in there wrapped in the blanket so her hair is visible, and she she responds to some questions, and she wants help freeing herself, but she's just sort of like, it's just very nonchalant. It's not like she's like, "Oh, thank you. It's just like, I'm here, I'm sleeping. Don't worry about it." She's basically trying to she's a mage, so she's waiting to get her spells back. So
I see. So she's confident she'll get herself out in the morning and just whatever, if you guys want to help me. Sounds like a very prideful character.
I know, but it's
I was thinking maybe she's supposed to have a quirky, prideful personality.
Right. It's just a little odd. And they're all like that. They're all kind of just like, "Oh, hi. Oh, you're here to rescue me? Okay, let's go." It's like, no one's like desperate. It's just weird. The whole thing, it's just this weird, like, here's like one of the people you rescue. Look at his picture. Does that look like someone who needs to be rescued? He's just like,
it looks like someone who's writing a book about his experiences to me.
He's literally writing a book. That's part of it. He comes in and he's like, "Oh, I'm a historian of Vecna, and I wanted to learn more about this. Don't rescue me yet because I want to learn more." That's like, all right, I guess.
He's like, "I'm just so excited to be chosen for the Vecna ritual sacrifice." That's kind of funny. It's got a humor aspect to it.
It is. It's just a little odd. So anyhow,
sometimes humor, like we've talked about before on this, on previous episodes, can be something that kind of can enhance the horror later on. If you have this kind of whimsical situation, and then you go into something really, well, you said that's what Pixar does to disarm you.
Yeah. No, but it's just brought about so matter-of-factly that you almost have to like reread it a few times to understand.
So you would have preferred to have some more descriptions that were like, this character that helped to paint like how do you portray these characters with their unusual personalities. You know, like the wizard is very prideful and like, you know, secretly you can determine that she's happy for the rescue, but she doesn't want to admit it. She's confident she could have done it herself.
There's a little bit of that, but I'm going to get into the worst.
They probably didn't have space to do a lot, right? Because we already got into word count. There is another super chat that's asking you, Stephen, how meaty is this book? Like MEATY, like in terms of like the meat. I'm guessing based on the number of pages they gave them that it can't get into that much meat because they only have less than 15 pages on average per level.
It's interesting. I'm going to get to it because when it goes to the 7 planes, there's a lot of meat there, but you could almost run them individually and they're very different. This is the thing. The biggest thing about this book is the connective tissue, and I used to say that to Linda when she was writing my adventure, is that like I like a lot of connective tissue. And the connective tissue is there. It's not necessarily there for you to read out loud, for the adventurers for you as the GM to read it. But it's there for you as the GM to understand what's going on in the world in the larger picture. And the old adventures, well, not the first edition D&D, because those had no connective tissue at all. But like the later second, third edition, especially even the Paizo ones, they have lots of connective tissue. And you can read it and understand and get into the heads of these characters so you could portray it. There's like very little to no connective tissue. It's literally running from place to place. And you have to fill in all the blanks. And I'm just like, I've heard this in their adventures, and almost always there's going to be in the DM's Guild a supplement that is the Vecna Eve of Ruin supplement, which will fill in all these blanks, and maybe they're counting on that. But it's almost like, okay, here's the bare bones. Here's a basic structure for an adventure. You're going from place to place. We're giving you the very broad strokes and what to run in each place, but you got to put it all together. And I just find that whole concept weird in this modern day.
Well, I feel like most adventures have to at least, maybe they don't have as bare bones of connective tissue, right? In other companies' published adventures, but most adventures don't have as like lavish of connective tissue as Jewel of the Indigo Isles, because Jewel of the Indigo Isles was a product that had the main team behind much of the decision-making process was you. You were the one who was funding it and was the publisher and who wrote the major outline. And so you only needed to get yourself in a room with yourself to decide that you were going to commit more funds to the product to make it longer and add connective tissue, which was required to extend people's contracts to go longer to get the amount of connective tissue we eventually got, which is a fantastic amount of connective tissue. It works great, but it's difficult to fit that in most amount of word content. In fact, Jewel didn't. It had to go up. It had to expand. So I think that's why it all comes back to what Linda said at the beginning. With page count, if you have to sacrifice the connective tissue or the actual content that is that you're running, which one do you choose? If you're told you can't have both, which one do you choose? I think you probably have to sacrifice connective tissue.
You're completely right. But here's the thing I wanted to ask Linda about this. So, okay, I wrote this book and designed it in such a way that you can pick up this book and you can run this as a GM from beginning to end and never, ever, if you wanted to, have to really make a decision because everything is in the book, including we put in what happens if they lose. Because many times there are it is an adventure path. It is semi-linear. There's some but it's pretty linear, and especially more towards the end, it gets very linear, and that's just the event. It's called the path for a reason, people. Okay.
Narrow, broad, narrow is how things tend to work. The beginning and the end of almost any story, even a sandboxy one, tend to be a little narrow, and then they widen out in the middle to various degrees.
But my point is,
but you're going to converge back on that big boss in the end.
So my point is I put in, and in fact, the very end, I'm not going to give any spoilers to our adventure. It gets really kind of out there, but almost sandboxy, especially at the very end where you basically are told you can do it, but you figure out how to do it. And you have almost too much control in a way. So we go all over the place. But the point is that I put in a lot of tools for GMs so that they can just run this as is. And they have everything they need to know. And I've heard the background is that's true, is that people did like it and they love that we put in so much. Now, you, Linda, would create adventures that have to be run in 4 to 5 hours by people, and they should be all in theory run by different people in the same way, because you did society adventures. So that puts you in a unique position of how did you used to structure those adventures so that everyone would run an adventure the same way. And I felt like your adventures always had just the right amount of connective tissue. It had exactly what you needed, that you can literally, and I've had to do this at Gen Cons, where I can literally sit there, read the adventure, and run it while I'm reading it. Like, I read this adventure 2 times. I probably, if I wanted to run it, would have to read this thing another 5 times, because it is all over the place.
Yeah, well, one of the things that, because Pathfinder Society adventures need to be written so that if a GM is handed the adventure cold a few minutes before the slot, they can sit down and figure it out. And what that means is that you have to assume that someone didn't have time to read the whole adventure. So that means that when the adventure sends you to a different part of the adventure, it's got to tell you where to go. So it'll be like, if the PCs resolve this diplomatically, then, skip to area C, or, otherwise do the encounter in area B4 or whatever. So letting the GM know, how does the state change based on the things that the PCs do? And, how do you respond favorably? Now, Indigo Isles does go more deeply into, like, what do you do if the PCs lose? Because in organized play, it's sort of assumed, well, there's mechanics for them getting rescued, and then they are getting resurrected, and then they go back on their next adventure the next time. They're never going to be down for more than a session. They'll always be back the next time, where their character died, and then they've got a new character, and then they're up and running again. But definitely, one of the tools that was very useful for those was I make little flow charts, and I'd say, okay, PCs get to this area. How do they approach it? They sneak, this happens. They attack, this happens. They try to talk their way through, this happens. And then you got to make sure that whatever path they take, they always make it to the end in some way.
Yeah, Linda taught I would say generation in terms of the company of developers and designers about her flowcharts and different things like that at Paizo. But it makes me realize that organized play scenarios are like Jewel of the Indigo Isles in some ways. And when you look at their page count too, a organized play scenario is supposed to be a third of a level. But if you multiplied that by 3 and then by the number of levels in an adventure path, you would get, and the number of pages that are in an organized play scenario, you would wind up with, I think, like a 240-page adventure path or something.
Absolutely. Organized play scenarios give you more space per encounter by a good amount, and that lets you present more background, that lets you present more connective tissue, that lets you generate more new custom stat blocks than you ever could in an adventure path.
Yeah. And also they're PDFs, so that you have almost unlimited space, not completely.
The fact that they're PDF exclusive helps a lot with that as well,
right?
Because you still have to be cognizant of the demand that places on the art team and the editing team and things like that. So we would say, okay, we have a ceiling for how many words we can have, and if we have an adventure that seems like it might go beyond that, then we pre-budget that, right? So for things like interactive specials, or even like the higher level scenarios, were budgeted differently in project management because they had a few thousand words more. So, though even a difference of a few thousand words might change the way that something is put through the pipeline. So
let me go through this a little faster, because we start with like half an hour in, we're on page 29. So here's what happens. They go through, they rescue them. They get this weird thing where at the very end they get linked to Vecna. Okay. How? Why? Who knows? But they get this metaphysical link to Vecna, and then they end up teleporting to Evernight, because you disrupt the ritual with the cult of Vecna, and Evernight is like the reverse of Neverwinter. And I guess it's kind of cool, but you go there, they're inside a coffin. You got to figure out your way how to get back to Neverwinter. You talk to some people, and then you're back. Why? Who knows? It's kind of weird. I don't know why they just did that. It's like, so I guess, they give you some cool stuff. I guess they just made it a little bit more of an adventure, and they wanted to bring you to they wanted to bring you to another plane, and they wanted to bring you to Evernight. hero. Evernight is the dismal mirror in the Shadowfell of the city of Neverwinter. But it almost feels like we just did it because now we can say you've been there and it's cool. But it's just like, why'd you go there? You literally get there and then have to escape from there. That's it. Do you learn
so,
it?
like, there was a trap that set you there and then you have to escape?
It just never. This is what happens. You are
Do you go there on purpose and then leave?
No, it just happens. Escaping. Here's what happens. You basically kill the fanatics, and then energy from the interrupter ritual opens a latent planar rift, and then shuts Eldon and the characters into Shadowfell. A riot of silvery purple energy fills the room. You feel a sense of space tearing open, and you're falling, and everything goes dark. And you're suddenly wake up in a coffin.
It's like a hazard type situation.
Yeah.
And escape the plane that you wound up in is kind of time honored. There's enough of those in Paizo Adventure Pass that it almost became a meme of like, book 4 or 5 is where you have to escape the plane that you got sucked into in some of the early ones. And so, like, I get it. That seems like it could be kind of cool if you have to deal with some Shadowfell encounters on the way out.
6 pages long. That's what I'm getting at.
That's how much space they had, I guess.
Well, that's the thing.
It would have been... Imagine if they had twice as much space and for everything, and they could do like a big Shadowfell thing with random encounters and more NPCs in the Shadowfell.
They're trying to talk about it. They're talking about Evernight, and they start talking about the Evernight. They talk about the corpse market, which is pretty cool. You talk about meeting this. You meet a vampire, a centuries-old vampire who can give them directions, and it's kind of fun. And then you find the tomb, and that's it. It's like, okay, this would have been awesome to explore this and find out, but it's 2 pages. And
that seems like the kind of thing I would do if I only had 2 pages for it, is try to get bullet points that could become amazing role-playing under the right GMs and just kind of hope. Whereas if I had more pages, I would put in more. So this is what I expect an experienced adventure author to do when they are constrained on pages. By the way, Linda, someone in the chat called out to Tome of Righteous Repose in terms of having a lot of pages.
Tome of Righteous Repose takes its head out, gets stuck down by edited team, and oh my god, I apologize to them so much. They're like, it's okay, we'll figure the way out, and then like they're working overtime, and I'm like, oh my god, I'm so sorry, I promise never again.
Someone says, will you just recommend to convert Age of Worms instead? There's so many Age of Worms conversions out there. Just run it. Age of Worms it's the greatest adventure, especially if you're old school. Or don't do both. Do Age of Worms. Age of Worms. Well, the one thing this does have, so this is very similar, is that Age of Worms, one of the big issues that people do say, there's a lot of fighting. And when I mean a lot of fighting in Age of Worms, there's a lot of fighting in Age of Worms. There's a lot of fighting, and I mean a lot of fighting in this book.
Is there fighting in Age of Worms, Stephen? I didn't quite catch that.
But the fighting in Age of Worms, it's actually, they give issues with it because it's a little out of control. But you fight really cool things. That's a problem here. You fight not cool things. Okay, so then what happens is, this is where it gets weird. So that's the beginning. Then it says the next chapter. This chapter begins sometime after the character's adventures Neverwinter. Days, months, or years. I was like, okay. And so that first one is almost like you just run that, and then that's just to get you to link to Vecna. And this is where it kind of can maybe get good, but it feels like there's a lot of it just happened. It feels like this entire adventure is nothing more than happenstance, and it happens because the plot demands it. So you're literally just sitting around, and then all of a sudden the 4 of you or 5 or 6 of you just appear in front of Astril, Tasha, and Mordecai's. You just appear, and it turns out they were doing a wish spell, and it turns out that they know something that Vecna is going to try to undo the universe and make it in his own image and kill everyone, and basically he's going to erase the multiverse and he's going to do it a Thanos. He's basically going to erase the multiverse and redo it in his image. Okay, that's basically what he's going to do. And they were doing a wish spell, and you appeared, and they are like, well, I don't know why you appeared. I guess you appeared because you're part of the wish spell, and maybe you need to like help us. it doesn't really explain that very well, but they basically explain to you, like people, these three very powerful wizards that just appear to you and say, okay, this is what we need to do. We need to find Vecna, and we're going to use this little chime of exile, and then we're going to disrupt him and exile him and kill him and make him so he doesn't do this thing. Are you with us? Okay, I guess. I mean, so that's it. That's how the adventure starts. Again, it's just very kind of weird. And then they're like, oh,
I'm trying to think about how you could pull people into the action with limited page count. And that hook where the wizards cast a wish spell gives you some options.
It does. So it does. And
for instance, they might have been able to save page space potentially by having something where the fact that it pulls you in with the action could have been the beginning of the adventure. What if at the beginning of the adventure it starts with you losing against Vecna, and then those wizards cast a wish spell?
Yes.
And that would be funny.
That would be.
And then they cast a wish spell, and it was your higher level versions lose to Vecna in a box.
Well, here's something else.
And then they cast a wish spell and are we pulled you from where you lost against Vecna, but now that you're the only one who has knowledge from the future, some knowledge from the future, and then you
put an asterisk on that though. Players can get rather upset when they lose in box text because they'd say, "Oh, we could have won."
Well, maybe they were about to lose and they got pulled by the wish spell back in time or something.
So you'd have to then structure it with something that players would buy. But okay, yeah, Vecna just did this complete obliteration thing, and often I find that with that, players are more willing to accept that really bad things would happen to the NPCs, the others, and not to me, my special snowflake character. So it's Vecna was able to get off the orb of infinite destruction, and and there was going to be this massive monster rampaging across the land, destroying everything, or there was going to be some kind of great cataclysm, and there was no more time to stop the timer, and then you go back and you.
So let me.
Now you can stop it.
So here's what happens. Okay, are you ready? I'm not going to tell you the spoilers yet, but here's something. So they basically, you appear, and they're like, oh, you're cool. You must be part of the wish spell. We need to assemble the Rod of 7 Parts. You go get it. We know where the first part is. Go. And here's a portal. Wing! And they literally just make a portal. And they're like, here's the portal. We know where it is. Go get it and come back. And your job is to go get the 7 parts. Go. And I was like, it's really, you got to be a master GM to run this adventure, I feel, because there's so much you just got to fill in and really convince them. You either have to be a master GM, or if you're running with my group, I would basically say, here's the deal. You're going to go get the Rod of 7 Parts. You're going to go all around the multiverse. We're going to have a lot of fun. Just go with it. And they'll be like, okay. And that my guys are always like that. They're fine with that. But not everyone's like that. Someone wants to actually do this. And more importantly, exactly, someone says, why are the 3 most powerful wizards in the multiverse, who are literally casting a wish spell, why don't they go get it? Why are they sending 11th level characters to go get the Rod of 7 Parts? What makes it so that they're not? And it doesn't really explain. It's whatever.
That can be really challenging to deal with in adventures. I think it's one of the reasons why Paizo doesn't have as many high-level NPCs floating around, because every high-level NPC you have floating around is someone else you have to justify why doesn't X just solve it. Yeah. And for issues that are less than the world is in danger, you can always say, oh, well, they're busy because the world is in danger. They can't handle the X, Y, and Z. But common things might be, well, one of the most common ones is, well, BBEG is watching us, but they're not watching you or whatever, or they've studied my things and have countermeasures to my magic, but you can find some way under the radar or what have you, or there's something about you metaphysically, or there's something about your accomplishments, or there's something about that pulls it together, and that's why it has to be
now, by the way, the wish spell made them tired from casting it.
They actually do mention that. They do mention
and if they did go with the tweet that I was talking about pulling them from a future where Vecna had activated his thing, it could also be the PCs.
They didn't do that. And
yeah, I know. That could have given a good explanation.
I'll tell you something else. This book is called Vecna, Eve of Ruin. Vecna, in those 256 pages, is in approximately, there's a big spoiler, 2 pages, and never interacts with the PCs directly. So that's something else. I was like, you would think you would want the main protagonist to either indirectly or directly interact with the PCs, and they don't. So that's
so Math Guy Dave says that the link to Vecna that was established at the beginning is why they need the PCs, according to the adventure.
Yes, according to the adventure, you're right. But it
does explain it, but it sounds like it's pretty abrupt because, again, probably they didn't have enough pages to make a long explanation in there.
By the way, if someone else has read this, like I read this very fast. I read this. Oh, I actually have to take this call. It's my lawyer. Can you two talk about adventure design? I'll be right back. I apologize.
Sure.
Yeah, of course. So when it comes to like the name thing, I don't want to give spoilers for it, but there is like a Paizo adventure path that also like gets flagged for like, well, based on the name of the adventure path, I thought we were totally going to defeat this thing, and then like you don't. So naming can be really tricky in that way, because when you call in the cachet of a particular main villain, the PCs are going to expect to make progress against that villain. But if the story of your world says, oh, you're not going to actually get rid of them, then people can wind up being disappointed in the end. But that can make it really difficult to use those big characters at all, because then people can also get frustrated if it's like, well, there's this big world shaking threat and you keep saying it's there, but we can't do anything about it. So what gives? Which leads to a lot of like, okay, how many times can you punch their lieutenants before you actually want to go and
what sounds like at the end you might be actually fighting him, just that he didn't appear up until that point. Which
I thought he said he doesn't never interacts with the PC
until then.
Until the end. Okay, yeah, fair enough.
And
that's fine.
To be fair, it's difficult to use your villain before the end, especially in a game system where PCs can punch way above their weight class, because your villain will get killed, and then what happens to the plot? Yeah,
basically, an adventure has to account for the possibility that anytime the main villain appears on screen, they could be killed. Even if it's vastly lower level than you think. And if you want to get around that, then you need to put in like some seriously heavy stuff, like often to get around it. Often that involves things like they're not actually here. It's some kind of a projected image. It's some kind of a clone. It's some kind of another thing. And you can use that kind of stuff sometimes. Eventually it starts to feel a little cheap, but like.
Well, I have an idea for this one.
Yeah.
Math Guy Dave said that there's a link. Steven didn't talk about that. So I'm relying on Math Guy Dave for this one. So if there's a link between Vecna and the PCs that will allow the PCs to beat Vecna, maybe he can whisper to them through the link as well, and be like saying certain things or threatening them and being like, I can sense that you're coming, or try to make them an offer at one point, like, what do you owe to these three mages? I'm rewriting the multiverse in my image. You can rule one of the worlds each, you linked people. Why don't you let me succeed? I don't need all of the worlds in the multiverse. You can have Kryn and Anselon. It's Dragonlance. I don't care about that one. And you love Spelljammer, right? You can have Spelljammer. That's like a multiple worlds. That's like a bunch of planets. That should be worth something. And you can have Birthright. You're that one person other than Matt Colville who really, really, really loved Birthright and was upset that they published too many box sets. I
see a super chat from Lord of the Unfinished Project. Like how Strahd Looney Tunes is away so much. Yeah, absolutely.
It's tough. It's tough in adventure design.
So, like, oftentimes those villains are almost like those super high power villains play a role that's almost more akin to gods, where like they're not something you punch on the screen, but they're something whose agents you deal with as a persistent threat. And I see like the comment from Joseph Moore about Galarian having problems with that, where they've had past 14, 15 years, dozens of world-ending threats, especially like if you keep playing campaigns in the same setting and your PCs have been doing them for your group. And then like, so for your home canon, these world-ending threats have all happened. And then you're like, why don't our other PCs come in and handle these things? And then you gotta justify that. I think it's a pretty common issue in fiction if you have a world that just is getting battered so many times. A related thing definitely came up in Pathfinder Society scenarios where we have these interactive special events where many tables are playing together at the same time. And we'd always be like, well, and so the story would require, hey, you need to bring together like 20 people up to like hundreds of people to achieve this goal. But then we realized we're like, okay, we did time travel. We're in outer space. Like we saved the world. Like what can we even do next time? There's the risk of like temptation to continue to escalate the scale of everything to the point where like you feel like you can't tell basic stories anymore because you've gone completely over the top. And that's something you see in like TV shows all the time too. I think about like the TV show Supernatural, for example, and you start off with like monster of the week plots, and then in the end it's just this completely ridiculously over the top, like great cosmic forces battling against each other stuff. So it's something to watch out for, certainly when you have the ongoing setting to let yourself tell those smaller stories together with the bigger stories instead of being in an arms race against yourself to save the world again. And that was even some conversations I had at Paizo being like, you know, have we done too much save the world from blowing up recently? Do we need to like take the scope down a little bit? Are people going to be tired of save the world? Like
you need to skip back to the Grand Convocation getting attacked
when planning out Adventure Pass is like how much save the entire world adventuring is too much.
All right, so there's a question that says, Linda and Mark, do you see anyone doing Dark Sun for 5e if they got permission in today's world, considering the dark nature of its themes? I think that if there was a Dark Sun for 5e, that it would inevitably be controversial because the way it was adapted would not be exactly the same as it was before, and some people would be like, some people would like some of the changes, but not others. And some people would like all of the changes, and some people wouldn't like any of the changes. And then
some people would say it didn't go far enough to removing some of the content that doesn't, you know, that to be offensive. Some people would say it went too far and lost the original character. Like I find that when you're dealing with something and the sense of like what is okay is shifted by enough, oftentimes it's better to start with something new than to try to take something old and change it around so much. Yeah. Or to say, you know, you're more like, you're not trying to say this is this exact thing, but this is inspired by, this is like a new generation of this, take some of the themes and ideas and takes them in a new way where you know, maybe you're doing something that it's kind of like this setting, but 100 years in the future, or some other major thing has changed to make it easier to say it's not exactly the same. Don't expect it to be exactly the same, but we'll take some of the pieces that you really like.
Because you have to think about who is it for, right? And if it's for the people who initially played and loved it in the past, then you have to think about you're making these changes though, right? You still want to grab people in the present that aren't literally exactly those people. But if the fact that you brought it back was sort of mostly for them, and you think a lot of those people are going to get upset about it, then is it even worth it compared to doing what Linda said and being like, we're going to do a new psionic, Dragon Lord setting, and it's inspired by the themes of Dark Sun, but it's not Dark Sun.
All right, I missed whatever you were saying. But anyhow, I'm back, and let's get right to this. So, because we're going very slow, here's the thing. They open up the portal, and the very first place you're going to go, so you start off in Sigil, you got to go get it, and you go to the Underdark. Now, you think, cool, I'm going to the Underdark. This is the first adventure. What are you going to fight in the Underdark?
Well, I figured that we're going to meet Drow at least at some point in the Underdark because they're very popular with Wizards of the Coast. However, on the other hand, there's also like a lot of discourse about Drow, so we might not.
Well,
what about, I know, what are they called? The Hookers. Those are like a pretty popular Underdark monster.
Oh, there's a lot of Underdark monsters. Well, you go to a place. It is like basically a secret headquarters of, it's Loth, and it's a place for them to send out agents to help Loth. It's sort of like a, I don't know what you would call it. It's let's see, masquerading as devotees of. I'm reading the wrong thing. You get sent to the Web's Edge as a hidden meeting place for agents of Loth who operate throughout the Underdark beneath the Sword Coast.
Are there
pursuing missions for the glory of the demon god? Blah blah blah. You meet goblin assassins. Ooh, Druider mages. Ooh,
Duergar.
Drugars. Sifilnib. Those guys, mages.
Svirfneblin. Duergars and Svirfneblins were on my short list.
I know, but
things.
Yeah, but so Do you encounter drow? Do you encounter an elf assassin? Ooh, human mages.
Are there riders?
Ooh, nope, nothing.
Okay.
No.
But is there a Yokelaw of Loth, since those are the handmaidens of Loth?
There is at the very end. So you go through this whole thing,
Okay,
and there's nothing. And I was like, all right, that's kind of a big disappointment. Like the adventure is just like show up and infiltrate this place, and it's all like the C team. It's not even the B team. It's like you're literally fighting the C team of Loth. I'm like, okay.
I mean, the Yokelaw's on her 18.
Wait, I'm not done. Okay. But there's 12 rooms, and rooms 1 through 11 are the C team. Finally, at the end, you do fight. It almost makes up for it. Check that thing out.
Oh, that looks cool.
A dragon spider.
Dragon spider?
Oh, that's awesome.
Okay, that almost makes up for it with a Yokloth. So I was like, okay, a Yokloth and dragon spider, you almost make up for it, because that is very cool. Okay, that's cool. I like that.
I didn't even think of a dragon spider, but that is an amazing thing to fight.
It's very cool. So, but again, it's just like, you gotta start off strong, man. You gotta really like hook them. And so far, it's like 2 very quick one-off adventures, and then you go here and you're all excited, and you're fighting elves. You know, I'm like, and they're not dark elves; they're normal elves. And
wait, maybe I'm not up to date on some of the Lolth lore, but doesn't she hate the other elves like a lot?
Yes,
due to like her things with Corlon, Laurenthian.
They're chaotic evil assassin elves and chaotic evil orcs, and they're chaotic evil. They are devotees. There's elves, yeah, and I don't know.
Maybe that's part of a broader change about Drow that's based on the discourse on Drow. But like in that case, just maybe use a different demon lord than Lol. Or something like that.
Well, she's like a major part.
I wonder when you're talking about the C team too, is it repeating the same stat blocks over and over again in different combinations? Like
it doesn't. This is the other thing. There's no stat blocks in this. It's only so the way D&D does it. It just says, and this is something that is a personal thing. I hate when they do this. It literally just says, you fight a goblin assassin, a mage, and then it bolds the creature, and then you have to find it and get the stats yourself. It doesn't even tell you the level.
It's from the monster manual, like the mage step block.
Right, so you have to go find everything yourself. It doesn't ever include it, only new monsters. And that's why, first it saves a huge amount of space.
Absolutely.
Which is, a big thing. But it doesn't even have the level. It just says you fight here an evil assassin is the creature, 2 mages, that's the creature, 2 grimlocks, and an Urnine. That's it. You got to figure it out. Like you figure out like all the rest. It's like okay.
Yeah, that's pretty standard for adventures when page space is compressed. I know that one of the things that you see what Paizo Adventures running into sometimes in those more compressed things where it's like they'll generate a new stat block, but then you're going to fight a lot of encounters that use that same like 1 or 2 stat blocks again and again in that area because of the compressed space and things like that. So that can be a real challenge.
Now the spider dragon is
how do you shake things up?
The spider dragon is here. One thing I do hate is they say spider dragon appendix A. Dude, I get it. It's a pain to say page 233, but couldn't you just say page 233 instead of appendix A? So, like, there, you get a full page for the spider dragon. So, there is stuff.
That spider dragon looks cool.
Oh, it looks great.
Art.
It looks great. But here's the other problem that I have, and actually I heard other people complain about this. The rod of 7 parts. Do you want to see what the rod of 7 parts looks like? What do you think it looks like before I show it to you? Because there's actually been pictures of the rod and there's the adventure of the rod.
Isn't it like this rod that's separated into 7 pieces?
Yeah, but when it's together, what should it look like?
Based on the art from the back, I'm thinking maybe like it has like a stick and then it has like 7 jewels on the top, and the jewels are what you're collecting.
I remember it being like this like black hull with like a geode on the inside or something from when it got shattered, and when you combine it, like the geode, like they like attach together or something like that.
There you go. That is not what I pictured. It's very modern. I know, exactly. It's like, huh? Yeah, okay, I guess.
That has some interesting implications about its origin. But what's like it makes me think about what's the story behind the culture that was involved in its original creation.
I think it was made by the Wind Dukes of Ultimate Law.
It is.
In the
that makes sense. That's why they have a more geometric patterning.
So this
to
is
it.
like the first part. Now, so it just looks very modern, and I've seen pictures. I pictured it. Maybe that's because I'm old school, but there's are pictures of it, and it's a rod. It's like a old school rod that had some, geometric parts on it, but that's it. It wasn't something super fancy and modern,
How does that match up with the general aesthetic for the very law-focused deities and creatures?
Well,
in the most recent books, because I wonder if that's what it's ripping off of.
Because it's supposed to be a primordial item made like in early days by those lawful entities that they fought against a demon lord, and it was forged by like the dwarven god and like the soul forges who forged the dwarves in there as well, and stuff like that.
So that's the first. So that's the first part. Now, here's my big issue with this next part. So now you get the first part. Okay. Now they mention in here that you as an adventurer might not get all the parts of the Rod of Seven Parts. Okay, that makes sense, except for one small problem. You have to, because the way it works is that you get the first piece, and then the second piece, you get the first piece. The first piece literally finds the second piece. The second piece literally finds the third piece. And they don't know where the other pieces are. So if you don't get the piece, the adventure stops. And they actually mentioned that, like, oh, they might not get all the pieces. Then how do they keep going? Because they literally say they don't know where they are. They only know where the first piece is. And it's scattered all across the multiverse.
But that's always been a property of them, that if you can use it to find the next largest piece.
That's what I'm saying. I'm saying is that there are things that you can literally get to the end of a section and not get the piece, which I'm going to get to later.
Oh. Right, but then what would you do? Would the Archmages just have to tell you that they found the next one, I guess? Probably.
See, now, this is an example of, like, now, if I wrote this, I would have had an entire set. Linda knows this after working with me. I would have had an entire section in there detailing, just for the GM to even know how to handle that. Like, what should they do? And give them suggestions of how do you handle that if they don't get a piece? How do they continue the adventure? How would you handle this? What are the different ways it's possible? And again, I'm sure this will be covered in a supplement or there's some other way, but it's not in this book. And they never mention it. They just assume you're always going to get the next piece. And that's a pretty big deal. So if you don't get the piece, the adventure stops.
That feels like something that would have been good for, like, given that page space was limited, instead of mentioning it everywhere, having like a page element early on for the GM that's like, what if they get stuck?
Yeah.
And then it's like kind of a shorter type thing.
Yeah, that could save you for doing it in multiple places if you just have a quick sidebar that's like, if this happens, then this bounty hunting group or whatever winds up with it eventually, and it has bolded an assassin and two mages or whatever it has, and they have to raid their stronghold.
It's just
And the because there should be some kind of a cost to failure in adventures. Otherwise, it feels like, why are you even doing this? So if you have to then do this other encounter to go hunt it down.
Well, I'm going to explain why. But this is not a big deal. The first one, because you can go in and get the rod. The first part, not a problem. Second part, not a problem. Third part, fourth part, it's actually, there's a very good chance you won't get the rod. There's actually, I'll explain why, but I'm like, ooh, this actually is bad. So let's get to it. And the thing that bothers me is that, so in our adventure, I added something called What If the PCs Lose? And it's throughout the Jewel of the Indigo Isle, where we have, basically, it explains in detail, if they lose, what do you do? And how do you keep the adventure going? And I know Ron liked that so much that in some of the Paizo adventures, he actually copied it. And it's actually in some of the ones that he worked on in the Adventure Pass. He literally says, "What if the PCs lose?" I was like, "Oh man, you copied that. You even copied the same heading as me." And he's like, "Ah, good idea." Thanks, Steve. I was like, "Okay," which bothers me because he knows this. He worked on this. They both
but
did.
it shouldn't he obviously knows
that.
it, and he probably would have wanted to do it if he had more space, right?
I know. I feel
they all would have. It's not like
it bothers me. It just bothers me.
It's not like the authors are saying like, how can we leave this out? It's more that they're saying it's a puzzle. It's a puzzle where you have to fit things in, and you don't have the option that we have in Roll for Combat of just being like, let's add more pages of like, what can we cram into these number of pages before we run out and lose something else somewhere else. And at the end of it, it's always heartbreaking because you might have written that section and had to cut it out of the book, or started writing it and being like, no, this is so important, but everything else we would lose like the entire encounter or something like that.
Things that bother me, like every single time you find a rod piece, it says, for more information about the rod and how it works and what it does, see the first section. They do that 7 times. You don't need to do that 7 times. I know where to find. I'm like, that was like, it's like, really? I'm like, why did you repeat that? If you're
that's a normal pointer, because if somebody stopped the adventure for a while and then they went back and then they're like, oh wait, where is this stuff?
Fair enough. All right, I'll give you that one. Okay, so that's the first part. You go back and then they go, okay, open up another portal. Let's go to the second part. Okay, so it's literally just you're jumping. It's a tour. And so the first one I thought was very disappointing. It's you go to Underdark and only at the very end. The next one you go to the Astral Sea. The Astral Sea is pretty cool. The Astral Sea is that's where spell jamming galleons are, and you actually fight. It actually starts off with you fighting, and you're just floating in the air, and you just say where you want to go. It reminds me of Guardians of the Galaxy. Is that you fight these?
Oh, that's cool.
It has these star anglers. Look at these things. They're actually these giant anglerfish in space, and you fight 2 of them.
Can they eat your ship in those mouths?
Well, yes, but you are just floating in space, and they attack you. So
they can definitely eat you then.
Yeah, let's say they're large. Actually, they're only large. They're large monstrosities. They're CR8, and at this point, you are level 12, I believe.
Okay.
So not that.
So
hard.
I haven't read the 5e Spelljammer, but while there are Githyanki ships on the astral plane,
there are.
While there are, those plane jammers that the Githyanki use on the astral plane are not the same as the Spelljammer setting, unless they changed it to be the same in 5e. The Spelljammer setting of Wild Space is actually on the material plane. So then the Astral Sea is on the astral plane.
This one is actually pretty cool. This one is that there's a ship, and the ship was using a piece of the Rod of 7 Parts to teleport and use its ability to teleport throughout the astral plane to be like a pirate ship, and it accidentally teleported into a dead god. So in the astral plane is where all the dead gods appear and slowly disintegrate, and there's a dead god that's it's very dead, and there's only parts of him left, and the ship is in 3 pieces inside the dead god's body. So
I mean, that's pretty awesome.
That is pretty cool. Like, I was like, okay, now, but it's like it took 4 at times. I'm like, okay, now we're cooking. Like, now we're
is it a famous dead god also?
I don't think so. I've never heard of it.
What's the name?
I'm looking for the dead god.
I want to, while you look for that, I want to acknowledge a comment in chat, because we've been talking more about how, like, more detail is always like super awesome to be able to figure things out and stuff like that. But that's not the way that everyone approaches reading adventure. So I just want to talk about a comment from Bill Taylor here. Prefers buying adventures, isn't looking to be spoon fed every single thing, and is looking for a lot of great pieces to use and figure out the other stuff along the way.
You're completely right.
I think I wanted to acknowledge that there are different people can be looking for different things when they look at adventures too.
Yeah, that when I look at something like this, I guess I've just been, I was going to mention this. I've been reading, so I read and run Paizo Adventures. Paizo Adventures just have a very different philosophy, and they don't spoon feed it to you, but they definitely give you a lot of connective tissue and give you a lot of background information. And they really give you an overview, just enough so that you know what's going on, but not too much. And I feel like that doesn't require another 100 pages. If they had probably another 20, maybe 30, they could have done that in this adventure. And I felt like it would have really made this adventure better. But so anyhow, you go around. The ship's broken up into 3 parts. This is mostly, there's some fighting. It's mostly just a lot of talking and just, they're all split up. You're talking to people. But like one of the things they mention here, this always drives me crazy. This just drives me nuts. They've supposedly been stuck on the ship for months, but they never mention like, and some of these are only stuck like literally in one part, and they don't want to leave. Well, what have they been eating? And they said they don't leave. They never leave. So I was like, oh wait, that actually does mention.
Wait, isn't it on the astral plane?
You're right.
The
You're right.
plane is timeless.
They don't eat. They don't age or experience hunger or thirst. I forgot.
Correct. They're on the astral plane.
Right.
That's it.
I forgot about that.
So what was the name of the dead god? You said it while Linda was talking. I didn't hear you.
Havoc.
Havoc.
Havoc. I forgot they don't eat or drink. I forgot. So that you win adventure. You beat me on that one. But it's like little things like that always drive me crazy.
It's not a contest, Steven.
I know. But it's not a contest, but it does. It's something I always think about because my characters will ask me that, and so I have to be ready to know why this happens because I know my characters.
So if Havoc is an existing dead god, it's not one that I know. But I still think that's a really cool piece of D&D lore to use in a sort of anniversary adventure.
No, it's very cool.
I would want an Underdark piece. You're right, maybe with some more classic Underdark monsters, but I would want an astral piece with the dead god. That sounds really awesome.
So you go around the ship, but again, the final fight is what really makes it is that you got to go into the heart of the dead god. Okay, so that's kind of cool. It's still beating. And then you have to fight this creature that's inside the heart that swallowed the heart. So, long story short, the Rod of 7 Parts was being protected by protective shielding, so no one can get to it. What is really weird is you find the captain, and it says right here that the captain, she has a prosthetic leg and wing because she's a diva, and it says here that she doesn't want to say here we go. She's hesitant to provide any information about the cargo, which is the Rod of 7 Parts, especially the rod piece, and isn't swayed by bribes or threats. And she has not left this room because she's guarding it. But if you and she's been trying to fix her wing and her arm forever, and if you just say to her, oh, I'll fix your wing, she'll be like, oh, the rod's right there. I was like, that's kind of a mood swing. I mean, I get it, but it's like, really? She's been sitting here for months, like guarding it and making sure no one goes near it. And then if you go up and just help her, she's like, oh yeah, you could take it too. You know, this thing that powers my entire ship. And like, that's how I like actually, survive. Yeah, it's over there and you can take it. Here's the key. I'm like,
does that require some kind of skill check to persuade?
Character must succeed on an intelligent or wisdom to know which joint must be reconnected. Oh wait, let's see. First you have to, let's see.
So it's hard to fix.
First you have to do a charisma check.
Like to deal with her situation, but she automatically agrees if you do.
Here, a character talking with her must make a DC 15 charisma check.
Okay. Is it a charisma persuasion or just flat charisma?
And then if you succeed, she agrees to help the characters. In addition to general history, she'll tell you about the location of the rod piece, how to deactivate the security system guarding it, and where it is. I was like, wow, that was easy. It's like one check and voila. I was like, okay, I guess. I mean,
well, in some adventure design schools, you wouldn't even gate something that was needed to get to the rod part behind a check at all, because like if it's needed to continue the plot, then
is there a possible solution where you sneak past and a possible solution where you fight? Because in that case, you can have a simpler option for persuasion, as long as it doesn't dead end the adventure.
Yeah, you can actually try to steal it, and there's like a sleight of hand check. And even the picture, like she does not look very happy. It's just like, she's like so nice. She's like, I'm not going to tell you anything. Oh, it's right here. Have fun. take the livelihood of my ship. I'll just hang out here. It's like, all right, whatever. Look, that's just minor. You go into this heart, you fight this really cool being. It's a custom. It's a creature called the Herloth. It swallowed a piece of the rod of 7 parts, and then you get it, and you're done.
It sounds like they're banging on these boss encounters at the end of the piece sections. Both of them so far sounded great. The Oaklaw and the Dragon Spider, and then this thing inside of the Dead God's Heart.
Yeah, this is very good. This is very good.
Now, those are going to be memorable set pieces.
They are. I'll give them that.
For like the end of it sounds like then they put a lot of focus in sort of the little mini climaxes at the end of each of these chapters. So they're going like bam, 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 and they're really focusing on those. And you would have wanted to see more investment as well in the lead up.
They may have had to use extra page space to make sure those were great. That I don't know exactly because I'm not looking at how it was divided, but that could have been part of it too.
All right. So then we get to chapter 4. Okay, now this is probably the best chapter. And actually, this is good. This is a good chapter. You go to Eberron, and this finally feels like something that was written by someone from Paizo. First of all, look at that art.
Ooh.
That's a person.
How big is that?
It is 300 feet tall. You go to Eberron, and there's a Colossus. And this Colossus, there was a big fight in the past in Eberron. And you're level 13, and there was these Colossi. And one of them teleported into a mountain by accident. So it's half mountain, half Colossi. I read this. I was like, this totally sounds... I don't know if it's Patrick or Ron, but that sounds like something they would do. It's like...
Or Amanda.
Could be. Yes, you're right. Or Amanda.
I think Amanda would, but also...
Yeah, I think any of them could do that.
Yeah.
The whole, like, classic, awesome mega dungeon setup where you can have, like, very unconventional rooms and connections and mechanics going on.
Like, I read
now watch it be Mackenzie, because we don't actually know Mackenzie.
We don't know.
Maybe Mackenzie loves
Colossi. It's probably all of them. It's probably all of them. Well, here's the best part. You go to this place, and you don't know where the rod is. So you actually have to go through the outskirts, and then you find 2 factions. You have to find this MacGuffin. It's called the Dosset. And the Dosset it's worth a lot. And the Dosset will help you find the piece of the rod because the magic and the wayfinding is weird. But there's these 2 factions fighting over the Dosset. And one of them wants to sell the Dosset from the ruined homeland in markets to make money, to make better lives for himself, and the other one wants the Dossets as sacred artifacts, and you have to meet them and come up with a solution, and that's the first part. So you have to meet them, you talk to them, and then you come up with like a solution and figure out a dispute so you can get a Dosset. And I was like, there you go. Now we're talking. It's not just because at this point it's like dungeon crawl, dungeon crawl, dungeon crawl, dungeon crawl. I was like, now we're going. This is actually very cool. Like, you have to even find where the rod is, and then you have to deal with like people in the actual world. And there's a lot of, so that feels like there's a lot of world building. It feels like there's a lot to it, and that's actually in
how many
adventure.
pages are in that chapter?
Well, this whole beginning part, like,
just this particular Eberron chapter. I'm curious because it takes a lot of technical skill to do something that complicated in a small amount of pages.
That's 8 pages just for that.
It's only 8 pages to do all that. That takes a lot of technical skill as an adventure.
That's solid, yeah.
No, this is very good. This is well. I told you this is the best part. Like, this is really well done. And then they tell you where to find. Then you get it, and then you find it's actually in a mechanical droid called Landro. Is actually the name of Landro. And then here's the map. And take a look at this map. I saw that map. I was like, okay, that looks like a Patrick Rennie map. Look how much detail is in that thing and how big it is. Patrick loves his maps. I was like, that's a Patrick map if I ever saw one, because he makes his own maps. That thing is all over the place. I was like, Patrick's
the one who taught me how to map cities and things like that.
Yeah, and I was like, because it's half caves, half caverns, half gigantic colossi. And I was like, that is awesome. And so it is really cool. And there's something in here called, are you ready? It's called gray matter fluid. Does that sound like Numerian fluid to you? Oh, you know why? Because it is very similar. They're very similar side effects.
Is it like the brain from the brain of the Colossus just leaking in?
Yes. And so anyhow, the rod itself, in fact, if you touch the Numerian fluid, the gray matter ooze fluid, like weird things can happen to you in your weapons. It's even has a chart. I was like, oh my god, it's Numerian fluid. Okay, this was totally written by those guys. It's like, I'm just reading this. I was like, this sounds so much like Iron Gods. And then there's these mechanical assassins that have taken over this place as their home, and they're trying to hunt you down and kill you. So I was like, okay. Then at the end, you meet the brain. Look at that thing. You meet the brain.
Oh, yeah.
And then the brain has tendrils that come out and talks to you and wants to learn about you. I was like, okay, this is great. I was like, this is.
I love those encounters with beings that think so fundamentally differently from humans that you're just like, what? Like, as a GM, those are so much fun too.
Yeah, so this is the brain, and the brain was using the rod to teleport and power this being because it's so big. It needed that as a thing. Here's the best part. After you get the rod, it is a huge spoiler. When Landro's shutdown sequence is activated, a magical soothing voice announces 1 minute until self-destruct. And I was like, this is what I would do, as you well know, because I have timers on everything, especially at the end. Anti-gravity.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I love
time management is so important on adventures, because the difference between an adventure where the PCs can rest between every encounter and an adventure where like the pressure is really on is huge in terms of the feeling of the scope. It's often valuable to shake that up. So you have some parts where the pressure is really on, and then some parts where things are a little calmer, and then some parts where the pressure is really on, and that can let you vary up your types of encounters too.
So you get the rod. There's anti-gravity magic throughout it. That dispels. There's a barrier like around it. You have to break through the barrier. That dispels. And then you have 1 minute to get out. And afterwards it explodes. And everyone has to do a DC 18 dexterity saving throw. Otherwise you take 18d10 points of fire damage. Which is 99 according to their math. Which is funny because from the Pathfinder point of view, I'm like, I mean, that's a lot, but it's not enough to kill you. I was like,
it's not Pathfinder, buddy.
I know. I was like, it's like 99. That's whatever. But still, it was like a self-destructing, exploding colossi. I would have made that like 40d20, or something insane. I would have had that insane. But hopefully they have teleporter ways to get out really quick. So that's that one. That adventure is fantastic. So that one is rock solid. It feels like a Paizo adventure. It's written like a Paizo. Like, I read that. I was like, okay, that is a good one. Then the next one is the Death House. This is the one that has the most issues. And you're going to hear a lot of people bitching about this one. So this is where they go to the Shadowfell, and they go to the Death House. The Death House is famous. It's been in other adventures. And it's basically, it's interesting. It starts off very interesting, is that there's a group of cultists that are going to do something to help Strahd out, and they have a piece of the Rod of Seven Parts. But at the very beginning, you meet this woman named Susandria. You meet her right away, and she's there too to also disrupt the cultists. And one of the things about this is that throughout the adventure, you have to roll this encounter table, and you will encounter her. And as you encounter her, you meet her, and there's pre-made meetings that tell a story about her. And there's even a part where she's doing a seance with a dead skull to find out more secrets. It's actually pretty cool. She's actually very interesting. The house itself is fine. I mean, it's like your standard, you're just fighting crap, and you're learning a little bit about the cult. But here's where it gets really weird, okay? Everyone's going to complain about this. This is super spoily. You get to the end, and after you find and get the rod, Strahd shows up. Then I was like, okay, he just shows up? All right, he just literally just shows up. Strahd has finally deemed a Death House worthy of attention. Once the party retrieves the rod piece in the ritual chamber, read the following. Characters won't see Strahd, but they feel his presence. And then they have this, actually, it's very well written. It's like, a gust of wind blasts through the halls of Death House, and the temperature drops precipitously. Candles and lamps snuff out and relight with dark purple flames. The wind takes on a monstrous timbre, like screeching bats or howling wolves, and crescendos to a deafening roar. Suddenly, it stops. For a long moment, you hear nothing. And then, as clearly as it was happening right next to you, the house's front door creaks open and slowly closing, latching with a crisp click. Then once again, nothing. So I'm like, okay, that is pretty good. Okay, they wrote that. But here's where it gets weird. You go around and Strahd just does things to make it that you can't find the exit. And then he does this like haunted house illusion thing. And then at the very end, right before you leave, you encounter him. And either two things happen. You either fight him and he takes the rod and you lose. So, okay. Like, now what? Like, seriously. And in fact, it even shows a picture of him holding the rod. Hey, well, you lose. That's your consolation. Up, adventure over. You lost. He has it. What are you going to do? He can teleport at will. I'm like, I got the rod. See you guys. Stink. So now the GM will have to come up with a whole brand new adventure to like go find Strahd to get that damn thing. Or here's the worst one of it all. If that woman, Sastrandra, is with you, Strahd regards the Inquisitor with grave respect and allows her to leave the house. I will permit you to flee this place, he intones, but only if you do so immediately and never return. He glances at the characters and then asks her, do you know them? And if she says yes, you just leave. And then it ends. That's it. Why? I'm like, that's it? He literally just lets you leave the house with her, who's trying to destroy them, destroy the cult, with the rod of 7 parts that he knows you have, and just says, you know what? We're all good. You can just go with her.
Is there an explanation for why he respects her?
Nope.
Is she an established NPC?
Nope. Basically, she is there. Here's the secret. She's looking for her father. Her father joined the cult. And she's there. That's it. It never gets... I mean, I got to reread this, but that's it. It's just like... I was like, so he's barely in it, and then he just lets you go. What? I don't know, whatever. I was like, okay.
I see a comment in chat, the haunted house illusion is what already happened in Death House.
I get, well, that already happened.
Is that possibly like then some effect that's still in play in that area as opposed to something that he activated? Because it does seem very weird if he activated something to keep you from leaving and then he comes up and he's like, oh, you're with this person.
Yep,
so
that's exactly what happens. No, it happens only once you get the rod. Then the entire place gets healed. The house actually gets healed if you did any damage to it. It then starts all these new haunted zones appear, where you have to figure out the correct answer, the correct exits. You can go into one location and appear in another location. There's a ghostly ritual. There's the crying room. There is the castle dining hall. There's basically the endless graveyard. So it's basically like 3 to 4 encounters with him indirectly, but they're illusions. And then at the very end, Strahd, after he arrives, he waits for the characters in the main hall. He has 2 vampire swan. If the characters don't intend to return to the main hall, they just wait in another room, as like the dining room or the den of wolves. When Strahd encounters them, read the following. So, intruders of my realm, we finally meet. From the way the villagers spoke about you, I expected you to be more impressive. Ah, well, I am forever disappointed with the insects I think themselves worthy of meeting me. I suppose I could entertain myself with destroying you. And then, oh, you're with her? Oh, okay, you can go. I'm like, what? What's going on? What's going on?
I'm wondering how he didn't notice that she was there if she was there with you the whole time.
It's so weird. Anyhow, I'm just saying that you're gonna hear. I already think I saw some people saying that it's very. Shrad's barely in it. It's disconnected. He lets you go with the rod that you know you have in his domain with his like whatever.
What that feels like to me is a story that was built from multiple directions, and then or partially revised in some way, and then it wasn't revise the whole way through. So you have like multiple strands that are out and not connecting to each other to form a cohesive whole.
Since we're already 2 hours.
It's definitely something that that you can catch even in later drafts of adventures. You're like, oh, wait, I thought I did that. Especially if you're familiar with an adventure and you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense because you remember it from 2 versions ago, but it doesn't. It doesn't
exactly. Strahd has new stats here, by the way, and he's much tougher.
I'm also thinking that the thing with the woman could potentially have been something about realizing that if he gets away with the rod, it breaks the adventure, and so probably was the start of a solution to that. But then it just didn't.
Yeah, I actually know. I have a feeling that he knows something about the rod, and that it's because that comes up later where they actually know the rod is more important than not, so they keep it. Whatever. Let's go because we're already 2 hours in. But I feel like we're actually learning a lot and talking a lot, not just about this adventure, but adventures in general. So the next part, they go to Kryn, and that's like that's where the dragon riders are and stuff. You go to Kryn, you think, hey, cool, we're going to fight dragons. No, you fight werewolves. So I was like, all right, whatever. So it's all about werewolves, and you basically are trying to... It actually does have a pretty cool map. So you're infiltrating this place. There's a ritual that's using the rod. There's a lot of stuff with ogre zombies, skeletons. There's a beholder zombie. There's a lot of cool undead. Okay, I'm going to say this one definitely has a lot of cool undead. There's bone rocks you fight. So if you're looking for cool undead, awesome. In Kryn, the land of dragons. All right, whatever.
Is it a basic beholder zombie or is it a death tyrant?
It is. No, they own the right. Remember, this is WotC. It's a beholder zombie.
No, that's what I'm saying. Is it just a zombie that is the beholder that was raised just as a regular zombie, or is it a death tyrant, which is the specific
zombie. You'll have to look it up. There's minotaur skeletons.
It's probably a basic beholder zombie thing, because death tyrants are a specific type of undead zombie-ish beholder that exists in canon.
No, it actually starts off like first you fight. You're hanging out. You're not even fighting. You're hanging out with werewolves. Then you fight raids. A fight at Death Knight. There's another werewolf. Zombies. Skeletons. Actually, 16 skeletons. 9 zombies.
Were there a lot of undead in the Strahd section too? Did you just come out of undead? No. Okay.
Nope. No undead. Or very few. There was mostly you fight like shambling mounds.
Oh, okay.
It's that's what I'm saying. It's like it just seems a little disconnected. I was like, okay, you were kind of weird.
Maybe that was part of the challenge of it, is that the Kryn section like stole some of the best undead that Strahd might have wanted to use as minions in the Strahd section that happened right before it. So to figure out like how do we do a Ravenloft adventure that is not the same as the one we know was coming after it, that's all about undead in Dragonlance.
No, this one's very cool. It does have very cool set pieces, and then you literally fight a death wolf, a skeletal wolf, death wolf, which is new. You fight a lawful evil archmage and disrupt the ritual, and then an adult lunar dragon appears finally, and then you fight the adult lunar dragon, and then you disappear with the part. It's okay. That's okay. The monsters are very cool. I like the monsters, but it seems, again, it's like the land of dragons fighting undead and werewolves seems a little weird. Then we'll get to the last part. This is actually, you have the 6th piece, now you're getting the 7th piece. Now we're getting somewhere. This actually was my second favorite part. You go to the land of Orith, the thing Gary Gygax made, and you appear at the Tomb of Wayward Souls, which was designed by one demi-lich known as Akarat. The same one who did the Tomb of Horrors. So this is one of his tombs. I was like, okay, that's cool. So you go to a secondary Tomb of Horrors. It's basically another Tomb of Horrors, and it's made by him. It's literally made by the same demi-lich, and it's actually guarded by an aspect of him. And you find, it's actually cool. You start off, you find adventurers, archaeologists that are fighting a kraken. So you fight a kraken you're actually on the kraken's in the water and you're on the land, and then you actually find the actual, sorry, my dog is going crazy. I gotta go get a Tomb of Wayward Souls. It looks very similar. It has it's actually, I don't know if this is good or bad. You discuss. it has the same layout and structure, and it like, for example, there's 3 entrances. 2 are fake, 1 is real. Okay, there's like a lot of the same points from the original Tomb of Horrors. Hold on, I'll be right back.
I mean, it was built by the same demi-lich, so that makes sense.
I think it does make sense. And also, like, it gets to the idea of, like, how do you handle references to past stuff? Because you know, you don't want the references to feel like they're exclusionary to people who haven't played the previous content, but it also, you want them to feel like they connect to the past content in some way. Like, it makes sense with the lore. Like, you're using the name and you're using it for a way that, like, players can choose how much they want to engage with it. So I think that's the kind of reference that is not going to make the game harder to make sense of for someone who hasn't seen that before, but will be like, oh yeah, I remember we did that, for folks who have done it.
Yeah, no, it's this is great. I love these type of adventures. This is a lot of fun. I think it's a very well made tomb. This like reeks of either of those guys or her. I don't know who does this, but it's like, it feels very much like, you know, this is what I was hoping there was more of. Like, wow, this is cool. This is like iconic. This is like something that it's like, oh, another tomb created by the same lich, and it has a lot of interesting traps and puzzles. But this is what I always find interesting. Most of these puzzles, okay, are real world solutions that you as a human can figure out. But they also have, well, if you can't figure it out, roll an intelligence check to figure out how to figure. So I always have issues with that. It's like, do you let them as human beings figure out these puzzles in real time and them trying to figure it out? Or do you let their PCs figure it out and then you just tell them the solutions? Aha!
It depends on your group.
Yeah. It's an eternal debate. We have an entire episode of Arcane Mark about this.
Oh, really?
Where Linda and I talk about it in detail, because in the industry, there's no consensus. There can be people at the same company in the same department who viscerally disagree in complete opposite extremes about, like, there should never be player things, or it should always
be player things. Even like at Paizo will be like, you know, you have people who are like, I hate puzzles, players don't like puzzles, it should always just be checks. And people being like, yeah, I feel cheated if it's checks, it should always be puzzles. So that's why I feel like that's what the standard has converged on more is, you know, provide a puzzle but give a check around it. And if it's someone who really hates puzzle who did it, then they'll just do the check.
So you eventually get to the very end. There is a false lich there, and you're not fighting Akarak, you're fighting Rock. the lesser of the liches. It turns out it's actually pretty funny. Upon creation, Raka was magically bound to Akarat's piece of the Rod of Seven Parts. As long as the piece remains within the tome, so much Raka. Raka represents the creator. He resents him for making him languish in this tome. He remains loyal to him, but he wants to leave. So you actually, and I love when they do this, is you can, instead of fighting him to the death, you can basically convince him to leave, join you, and give you the Rod of Seven Parts, and you'll like, hey, it sucks that you've been put here for eternity to guard this thing. Let's get out of here, buddy. And I'm like, that is great. I love that. I love that sort of stuff, and it's very cool. Like, I'm like, okay, I love that, and because it's just always, it's way more memorable to go fight the main bad guy, and you're like, okay, I'm ready for the big fight, and the guy's just like, you know, sitting there reading a book. It's like, oh, hi guys. Yeah, I don't want to be here either. Can we just like get out of here? And you're just like, okay, what happened? So
we found Rod Fragment 6, and I am keeping score.
This is 7. This is 7.
This is 7?
Yep, that's the 7.
Okay, I missed one of them, I think. So if I have heard 6, and I was keeping score, and I heard 2.
One in the Underdark, then the Astral Sea, Eberron, Shadowfell.
Wait, Shadowfell? Where was Shadowfell? Was that the one? Is that the one that's Ravenloft with Strahd?
Yeah.
Okay. Then Dragonlance, and then this one.
Oh, what did I miss? Oh, well, there's one more. You're right.
So I'm keeping track, and of these so far, Steven has rated 2 of them as being excellent, 2 of them as being good, One is being, it sounded like mid but slightly low because the ending he really liked, but the rest of it were the C team.
Yeah.
And one is being actively having some issues and because of the plot not cohering.
I can tell you right now.
So that's not too bad so far. Obviously, I'm leaving out the connective tissue being the issue that they didn't have enough space to connect these, but individually, it sounds like a lot of them you're rating highly. Let's see the last one, the 7th one.
The last one is excellent. So Eberron is excellent. The Tome of Wayward Souls is excellent. Shadowfell is fine. In fact, that's I think that's the weakest one. Because
that was the one that you said had issues, and then you said Underdark was second to worst so far because it even though the ending fight was very good, it also had the
it's really short. It's just not that great. The Astral Sea one's good. Astral Sea one, that one's excellent. That excellent.
It's good for Steven ratings. It's good. And the Kryn Ansalon Dragonlance one was another one you had on good.
It's good. It's like, it's got a lot of interesting fights. But then the last one, you go to the Heart of Avernus, the first level of the 9 hells. And you know who rules the first level of the 9 hells?
Avernus, it's Belle, right?
No, in this one it's Tiamat.
Well, she lives there.
She lives there.
Maybe she got rid of him in some of later canon. She definitely lives there.
This is the best part. So you have to go. You go there, and you first get there, and then you hang. As soon as you get to there, you find it's like Mad Max. You hang out with these bikers that are raiding hell for parts. And you hang out with these, let's see, they're called the Ventrax, and you get a ride with them. It's literally Mad Max. I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. So you like go to the wasteland, and you're like riding around, and you don't have to do this, but they're going to go get some like gems or something. They're basically trying to get some, what are they trying to get? I don't know. They're trying to get stuff, and you're just hanging out with them, and they ask you for help. And if you help them, they'll bring you to where the part is. And so you can or not, there's actually some complications. I won't get into it. You end up going to the Red Belvedere. The Red Belvedere is a casino in hell that is connected to the lair of Tiamat. And people go there to have fun and to pray to Tiamat. Okay, this is like I would write this. I was like, okay, this thing is freaking fantastic.
That's a really cool adventure location.
It's very cool because what you have to do is the only way you can see Tiamat is you got to get enough credit. In which case, they have their own system there. It's called talents. That's the money system, and it's 10 gold is 1 talent. And you have to get enough talents to get invited to the High Rollers area where you can hang out with Tiamat and the High Rollers. So you got to go through and you got to take part in all the casinos' hijinks. There's a racetrack, and then you have to like take part and like race 6 nightmares, and you like actually take part in the race. I was like, all right.
Yeah, Steven, this is 100% up your alley.
Oh my God, I love this stuff.
It sounds really awesome. It reminds me of a campaign I ran where people went to hell looking for Tiamat to kill her, and she actually sent them home with like a snow globe or something like that. And one of the PCs decided to conspire to kill Bahamut because he's like, Tiamat was nice. She gave us a snow globe of Tiamat's lair. It was like a souvenir.
Well, it's funny how players can go from, or characters rather, can go from murderous to friends so quickly for the simplest of gestures.
Yeah,
that's totally true.
You literally enter this race where you race nightmares, and you have to like go through this race. Then another one, there is a coliseum where first you fight Balguras.
Barlagoras.
Barlagoras.
They're aren't those demons? Why are they in hell? I guess they were keeping them there. That's why they probably imprisoned them and forced them to fight people to the death.
Then you fight, always fun, a purple worm. Dun, dun, dun.
I mean, yeah, purple worm's awesome. And you haven't done it so far. It's a classic monster.
And then you fight 2 iron golems that have wings that allow them to fly. So I'm like, that is great. Then there's this. So you go in and you have to. Then you fight 2 horned devils on the final team against the champion. I was like, and you get 1,000 talents if you win. So this is like, I'm like, oh man, I love this crap. Then you have the Stygian maze. So you have to get through a maze. And there's like all this crazy stuff in the maze. There's, let's see what else there is. So after you do that, you get enough talents. There's like an auction. There's this game called Triple Hydra that you can play. This is just, I love this. I love this crap. This is like totally up my alley. So eventually you get to the Dragon's Pride, and then you end up meeting Tiamat. Tiamat's not really there. Actually, instead, there's an ancient red dragon is guarding the rod. And you can actually either fight the ancient red dragon, or you can talk to Tiamat and say why you need it. And Tiamat, listen, now see, here's the difference between the Strahd encounter and the Tiamat encounter. Is that if you tell her, Tiamat is like, says here, if the characters inform Tiamat of Vecna's plot, Tiamat growls in disdain before grudgingly allowing the characters to leave with the final piece of the rod. She explains that the material plane is partly her creation, and she refuses to let that overzealous archlich like Vecna unmake it. So I'm like, okay, that's fair. Like she's like, ugh, I don't want you to have it, but I don't want him to win either. Okay, you can have it for now. Like she kind of, and she's like, I'll just take it from you later when you're done. I was like,
yeah, and that makes sense. Go handle my dirty work. Right. I'll pick it up later. I was like,
that is how you handle that. Like that's not a fight. Like that makes sense. The other one's like, oh, you could just leave. I'm like, ugh, that doesn't make sense. Or you fight the dragon and you take it. So that's kind of cool. So that's it. Those are the steps. So each of these individually are pretty cool, but they're not, but if you read Age of Worms, this is Age of Worms. Age of Worms goes all over the multiverse. You go to all over the place, but it's very connected, and it's not a rod of 7 parts. You're learning pieces of a puzzle, and it goes from piece to piece. So, I think it did an okay job. Eventually, at the end is just...
Sounds like you really overall like the individual parts, because you rated 3 as excellent, 2 as good, 1 as like okay, but like you like some parts and not the other, and 1 that had flaws. That's pretty good for a set of 7 things. But that was the connective tissue that got you down, because they ran out of space for it, probably.
And then the end, like, here we go. Like so when you go from level literally 18 to 19, it is 1, 2, 3 pages. Like that's it. And it's a super big spoiler, but I think you've all been spoiled at this point. It turns out that Mordecaium was actually Cass in disguise all along. And Cass was just having you do his dirty work with him. Cass was the main general from Vecna, and he's the one who killed Vecna and made the eye and the hand. And he's a super vampire, and they hate each other. They used to be best friends.
Yeah, they're the Sword of Cass. He's a very famous character.
You get the Sword of Cass from this. So he steals it from you. He basically messes up Tasha and Asteriel and takes the rod and leaves. And that's it. And then you level up. And I'm like, okay, that was kind of weird. You then go to Pandomius. It's part of it's a section of
it's one of the layers of Pandemonium.
Pandemonium, right.
But I think they're one of the layers has a name that's very similar.
Yeah, it's Pandemonius. It's a layer of Pandemonium. And you go there, there's a gigantic war going on between vampires and Loth, and it's just a huge war. This reminds me of the what's the one where you were fighting? Oh, I can't remember the one, but you have to ascend this hurricane tower. Whoops. You have to ascend a hurricane tower, and you have to bring it down because it messes up the fight. You're fighting demons, and basically he is there to get his buddy out, and that is the what's the wolf spider? Not the wolf spider,
Miska the wolf spider,
yeah,
the demon
wolf
lord.
Spider. Yeah, he's basically there to get Miska the wolf spider out, and he's in the citadel. So, and in fact, it's him. There's Koss trying to get the wolf spider out, so you can actually see. So you're there to disrupt it. There's this war. It's kind of cool. And then eventually...
I would expect to see Miska and Cass in some kind of Vecna adventure, and there they are.
It's cool.
Especially if it has the Rod of 7 parts,
Loth
and Miska
there.
is the one who had broke in the first place when they
You eventually fight Cass, and you get a sword. So it is kind of cool. Like, you do get some... Like, now it's like, okay, that's kind of cool. Like, you do get some pretty cool things. And now you end up fighting Vecna. And this is where it kind of all falls apart, because you don't fight him. Like, you end up going to this, you go to an area where he's unmaking the world, and he's in this huge, of course, ritual. And you have to go to 3 realities that are being created. One of them is Cass is being tormented forever. And so you teleport to that reality, and then you have to undo it. And so it's like... It's a little weird. Cass is actually a good guy in this because he's being tormented, and to him, this is reality. Like, this actually is reality. It's like which of the stones from you know what I'm talking about. So that
reminds me of like Red Hood Joker in the reality where like Batman is like evil and Red Hood is like the in one of the weird alternate realities in DC, there's like a Red Hood who is like not villain, but is like fighting against the totalitarian Owlman or like evil Batman or something like that.
So Cass is being tormented. Then there's a new one where you go to Neverwinter and he's a new king. And it turns out that Vecna is like, let's see. Vecna turned Lord Neverember into a Death Knight. And then you have to undo that reality. And then there's another reality where you have to... Actually, this is kind of cool. You have to fight like an astral dreadnought. So it's kind of cool. So you go to 3 realities, and you're like these pocket realities that are alternate realities. But they're not big enough to like be... They're so small that they don't really seem to have any power to them. And then you eventually, after you do that, you have enough power, I guess, to fight Vecna, and you fight him, and it even says, this is how confronting Vecna, he doesn't even pay attention to you. He's literally he's weaving the ritual of unmaking. It says right here, second to last page, he's too focused to pay the characters any mind unless they confront him directly. So he's like, doesn't even know you're there. Like, you're doing all this, and he's just like, where'd you come from? You fight him. And here's the other thing that bothers me. To undo these realities, you can either use the Rod of 7 parts, or you can just cast a level 7 spell. So what the hell did you need the Rod of 7 parts for?
So you didn't. So is there nothing you actually needed the rod for?
Well, no. Cass needed the rod to free the spider.
But you didn't need it.
You didn't need it for your ultimate mission.
The other 2 archwizards were tricked into thinking that you needed it.
Yeah.
So I guess that's your answer to how do you move the adventure forward if you didn't finish the rod, but then it makes it feel like what was the point of all the stuff that you did?
But you can't get to the next part because you don't know where it is.
Cass won't betray you until you have the rod, though.
Right. And then the conclusion. Are you ready? After this huge epic adventure, here's the conclusion. With Vecna banished to Orith and his ritual foiled, the characters have saved the multiverse from ruins. If the characters fail, the multiverse becomes a terrible place indeed. The characters who return to the Sanctum of Sigil are greeted by Astral and Tasha, who immediately begin planning a magnificent celebration in honor of the characters' heroics. Though stymied, Vecna is far from undone. He might stubbornly attempt to destroy and recreate the multiverse again, or he might formulate a new scheme to bend the cosmos to his will. Either way, it will be some time before a new band of adventurers must rise and defeat the Arch-Lich once again. The end. I was like, that's it? That's the ending? It's the entire ending. It's this and this. That's it. That's
still like a significant percentage of all the pages that they had, though, right? Would you want them to put more on that and take out the encounter and take out some from like the negotiation encounter at Eberron?
Take out that art. You don't need that art. See that? Use the rest of this page to talk about a celebration. Linda, you wrote the end of my adventure, and I told you to make a big ass celebration.
Yep.
Because it's the end. You want to be.
Yeah, it was the longest. I've never seen a published adventure go that hard into the end. Because usually they are more like that one there, and maybe a little longer, but where it's just like, you win, congratulations, great job. If you lose, then
I disagree 100%. And I had you write a nice long ending and had lots of like, and again, it's just because this is the end, man. What people remember about adventures is they remember the beginning and they remember the end, and the middle is nebulous, but they always remember those parts. So you better make them freaking good. And the biggest thing that bothers me is the beginning is so meh and the end is so meh. They could have just, it just needed a few more paragraphs and you would have been fine.
I feel like they were applying this on a micro level in that they had like sub climaxes to the different parts. And it sounded like they did do that at the end of each of those chapters.
Oh, no.
But not for the end of the overall adventure, possibly due to space constraints, I would guess. Just based on how think about how long we've talked about this, how much stuff was in that. It was only 150 pages. Now that is like that's around 1.5 adventure path volumes only. It's a little more than that, but still.
So you're talking about like for Paizo length.
For Paizo length adventure path volume, multiply by 1.5, add a few more pages to that. That's how many pages they had to do all of the things we just talked about. Like, they did not have very much space for this, and they went to different entire settings also, which, like, they may have needed to provide some context on them for people who didn't know all of these settings, like we did in this video.
I think one of the challenges here is that they have something that canonically has 7 parts. With the amount of space they have, it would have been a lot easier if they had like a thing that canonically had 4 or 5 parts, and then you could expand things out and say, okay, you know, we're going to do an adventure from level 15 to 20, say.
It's so close. Like, if I read this and if someone gave this to me, I would have been like, this is great. Add more here. You know, like add more, like change the monsters here, add a little bit more, add the connective tissue, have Vecna appear throughout the freaking adventure, as opposed to once in the last 10 seconds. Do what you said, is have him appear in the beginning, have him appear beginning, middle, and end. That's basic. It is a lot that I adhere very closely to script writing principles and even just story structure principles of how you're supposed to structure stories. And I feel like the big issue with this is that they wrote it like an adventure, which is okay. But in this day and age, considering how important this was, how big this was, it's supposed to be the 50th anniversary, that it should be more than an adventure. Like, it should be an epic tale that is also an adventure. Does that make sense? Like, that's what we did with Jewel. Like, Jewel is like, you can read this thing and you don't even need to run it, and you're like, damn, this thing goes places. Like, you can just read this as a book, and it's awesome. And then you get to run it. And also, again, I've said it a million times, but I say it all the time. I say we used a lot of script methodologies and things you see in movies. And there's a reason why there's basically like 5 methods for telling stories. There's like, I won't get into them, but there's basically 5 main methods. And I used one of those main methods, and they didn't use one of the main methods. Like, they just basically put this together. And I was like, why? Please, people, if you're writing an adventure, use Joseph Campbell's method. Use Dan Harmon's. Use like the ancient Greek methods. This is all extremely well documented. You can take online classes on this. Like, they work. There's a reason why these have been working. This is a reason, okay? There's a reason why certain movies make so much money, is because you're like, what made that movie so much better than others? Well, they actually used these plot structure devices, and they felt very close, but they kept missing the mark. That I feel without a lot of work, it's going to require you to add all that.
I think you will have to add all that. But it's possible, we don't know, that they even had plans to do those things, but had to cut them for space, or it got adjusted because of the constraints. Like, everything is done in 16-page signatures usually. So if they gave you 32 or 48 more pages, you could definitely put that connective tissue into this adventure and all of those things. I'm sure that the authors of the adventure could too, but with the space that they had, I think that was very challenging. And that's probably because from the planning phase, they weren't given enough space to do this much. It was very ambitious, and it seems like it delivered, as you said, some really excellent sections in separation when you just look at them and just look at this section.
Yeah.
I think one thing you'll find structurally with connective tissue is that one of the things that makes a big difference on that is how many authors do you have, and at what time is the content getting synthesized and developed together. Because if you have an adventure, if you look at like Paizo Adventure Path, for example, which have some of the most like, where did that come from, or what was that connective tissue? Oftentimes what will have happened is that the developer developed and sent part 1 on for publication before they saw the manuscript for parts 5 and 6. So they didn't have all of that stuff together to make those kinds of connections. And that's where you get sort of that mismatch. So I wonder if that was part of what was going on here too, is that like, author 1 and 2 did their things, and then like their stuff was sent through onward. And then it was like, oh, wait. And especially then you might have the thing where you don't have a chance to look at everything holistically and connect it all together.
If you want to read how to write a really good adventure, just read this. Just read Julie and the Goliath. We have reviews have been very strong. People are starting to finally finish this monstrosity. And what was the review you had, Mark, that someone gave you?
There was some guy whose username was something gnome, who's a professional GM, who said that they ran all of the Pathfinder 2 Paizo Adventure Paths often multiple times, and Jewel, and that they found Jewel to be the one that was the easiest for them to run, just like you were saying, Stephen. It included things that just made it smooth, and I think that was very nice review from someone who had a lot of perspective. Obviously, Jewel has a huge advantage in that it has a way higher page count to put those kinds of things in than any adventure path that covered 11 levels other than Jewel has.
True. And on top of that, it's funny. I've been hearing people finally are up to like Linda's part, and oh man, I can't spoil it, but there's a lot of fascinating things that happen at the end. I'll leave it at that.
It's so over the top. Like having the, it was really funny, Stephen, working on that to see like what the number of words you estimated it would take at the beginning. And I'm like, all right, I gave you something that takes that many words. And you kept being like, oh, add this, oh, add this, oh, add this. And in the end, it was more than twice as long.
Well, someone
I kept being like, are you sure? It's like, yeah, okay, here we go.
Well, someone said, I saw someone review, and they said the ending of this adventure is like, what did they say? It was something like, it was like death metal, or not death metal, but it was like, oh, this is just absolutely ridiculously over the top, too much.
Absolutely.
Like 80s, like it was just like so much. It was just so much. But it builds to that because it starts off so easy, and then by the end you're like, what the hell just happened? What is going on? But that's what makes it memorable.
There's so much freedom that came in having as many pages as it took to get it fully across.
Yeah.
I see a comment about like, watch a lot of videos that talk about how to write an adventure and cite things like Joseph Campbell, but they have no idea how to actually follow that advice. I find that having a good plan and structure from the beginning is very helpful. To sort of plot out like where are your major points where you're going to hit those beats.
Well, wait, let me ask you, and not to pat ourselves on the back. So I wrote it was like a 33,000 word. I think it was like 35,000.
It wasn't quite that long, but it was very long.
It was 30,000. It was 30,000 words. No, I counted. It was about 30,000. I think it was 35. I think it was 30, but it was an overview of the adventure, and then I gave that to you and everyone. And did that have enough detail in there for you to outline what you needed to do?
Yeah, absolutely. That was incredibly detailed. And you'll see that starting from a detailed outline really, really helps adventures, because the detailed outlines can also contain within them that critical connective tissue, because then you don't have those gaps in them. Another thing that I keep in mind when I'm concepting adventures is that you have sort of the adventures concept is in a tabletop RPGs is inseparable from the ideas of how many levels does this cover and what levels is it for? Because that's going to have so much impact on the kinds of stories that you tell and where you're going to set those beats.
Yeah, something else we kept doing in the adventure that, again, without spoilers, is that we had to have places for characters to continuously go through the adventure, but then restock. And that's a bigger issue in Pathfinder than maybe D&D, but you really do need to go and sell things and restock. And when you start going into, like, this actually does a good job. This actually does a very good job of you keep going back to Sigil. So you can go back to Sigil every level, and then you can level up and get all your new stuff. So you always had a home base of operations. But our adventure, you don't really have a home base. It kept going, but I had to keep putting places where there would be places for you to actually stop, rest, level up, and get new gear. And you had to keep, in fact, we had to add them, because I realized in places, and Mark wrote one of them, it's like, we're like, oh crap, we're literally in the middle of nowhere. Let's figure out a place for them to go. And we added one. So that's something else you need to do, is that, and I see that sometimes in adventures where you're in the middle of nowhere, and I've seen this many times, and then they're like, especially in Pathfinder, it's like, okay, I need to get stuff. I need to find things. And it's sort of like, all right, I guess I teleport to Absalon and get some stuff. And it's sort of like, well, then why aren't you just teleport? It sort of like breaks the whole flow. And you're like, I'm just teleporting to Absalon. I'm just going to the, Manhattan. I'm just going to get all stuff. Hey, I'm just going to leave them there. I don't need to go back to that adventure. It's like, well, why are you leaving the middle of the adventure? It kind of breaks the whole meaning of like being in the middle of the desert and going on an adventure in the first place. So,
yeah. And when I think of sort of the Dan Harmon hero's journey, the character is in a zone of comfort, that they want something, they enter an unfamiliar situation, adapt to it, get what they wanted, pay a heavy price for it, return to their familiar situation having changed. The idea there is that there's something that is going to disrupt the status quo. It's going to challenge the players. The characters are going to need to change as a result. And the world is different for the fact that they did that adventure, and they are different for the fact that they did that adventure.
Right.
So, there are stakes. And even though you do get back to a place of comfort, you get back to a place of settled, you don't feel like you just wasted your time. There's a new normal.
Yeah.
And, the PCs advance their plots, and villains advance their plots too. The world changes. It's not static.
Yeah. And on top of that, you have to have, the one thing this adventure also is kind of missing is a ticking clock. Like, there isn't really a ticking clock in this adventure, because I guess they can,
there sort of is the implication of one, that in fact that's going to rewrite the multiverse. Yeah, a lot of adventures have a fake ticking clock where you are told that there's one, but there kind of isn't, because they're not going to really run out of time. That's very typical.
It is.
That's typical in Paizo adventures as well.
No, you're right. Well, the way they usually handle it, the way we handled it, is that there's a break, but then the ticking clock, you decide when that ticking clock starts. But when it starts, it's almost like, you ready? And everyone's like, we're ready. It's like, start. And then the clock will start, and it's not going to stop until you're up to like the next break. And at least that's how we handled it in Jewel. And actually, that's how I usually handle even my adventures when I run Adventure Pass. Is that they'll be like, okay, are you ready? Have you leveled up? Have you done everything you want? They're like, yes. It's like, okay, once we start, you're not coming back, and I even warn them. I'm like, you're going to be stuck somewhere, so you better have everything you need. And they're like, yes. And then once it gets going, it's like you're on this ride and you ain't getting off. So that's something else I like to do. Some people have complained, once again, that this is super railroady, that you have to go in this order and you have to do this. And I'm like, I hate when people buy Adventure Pass and then they complain that it's railroady. Yeah. And
if you knew about the Rod of Seven parts
That's-
in advance, you kind of knew it was going to have to be a railroad, because those adventures always are, because you find the piece and that lets you find the next piece.
Like Shattered Star for Paizo, where you find there's 7 parts and you find one and it leads to the next part, and in the end you can put the parts together. You know.
Yeah. Oh, I never read Shattered Star. I saw it, but I never read it.
It's very similar. It's got a lot of big dungeons,
dungeony.
but with things that you were talking about liking, where you can sometimes talk your way out of things.
Oh, okay.
But it does have the same sort of thing where, you know, you have to get the next part, or then what?
Yeah.
There were also some dungeons where they didn't explicitly talk about talking your way out of things, but they created huge social tensions between different groups in the dungeon that our party exploited and got them against each other and caused lots of havoc.
Yeah, I mean, and not only that, it's funny because people always say, "Oh, Kingmaker was so great. Kingmaker was so great," and it was like, you know, it's a sandbox adventure. I don't like we only lasted the first adventure. We got to level 4 and then we stopped because I turned out, maybe it's me and my group, but it was the definition of analysis paralysis, that they needed direction. They need to have an adventure, a call to action. They need quests, side quests. They need to have a main story. And by having it so open that it really felt disconnected, and in fact it was. And I think I'm the only person who actually doesn't like that adventure. I like the concept, but in reality, when I ran it, it did not work well at all.
Some groups don't go well with sandboxes. Some don't go well with railroads, and you need to play an adventure that works for your group. I will point out that Kingmaker, one of the most lauded adventures has for Pathfinder, has in the original version, not the PF2 conversion, which I think added some things from the video game, the same problem you mentioned with this one, where Vecna is kind of not in it most of the time until the end, where the villain of Kingmaker kind of pops up at the end somewhat unexpectedly without a lot of good foreshadowing. But the Pathfinder 2 edition and the video game version took care of that by adding in more foreshadowing.
The other thing is, you really need... I mean, I'm asking a lot. I mean, we should probably just do a whole thing on adventure writing, because it's like, one thing you also want to do is to tie them into this world and tie them into the adventure. And there isn't any of that in this adventure, because you're literally going from place to place getting these rod parts. So there's not the same NPCs. You know, you're literally like a TV show. And every episode you're going somewhere new. And it's like, okay, we're going here, okay, and then we leave. And then you go somewhere new and you leave. And you don't have the same NPCs. And because you don't have the NPCs, you miss, that's another part of connective tissue. And in our book, in Jewel the Indigo Isle, you have NPCs that you hang out from level 1 to level 10, and you actually can then do things with them when you're higher level. So you could form these very cool relationships with these NPCs, and they could die, and that could really mess you up. They can become heroes. They can hang out with you. Like, it's up to you and your group, but there's tons of opportunity for it, and it's built into the adventure. And I really like it when you have Harry Potter. Okay, they do this very, 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 very well in Harry Potter books, is that they reconnect characters throughout the books, and it feels incredibly connected and integrated because it feels like a real world. And we do that a lot. I found out to do that is incredibly hard, which is now I know why no one does it, because I had to rewrite this thing 1,000 times. But boy, I think it was worth it in the end, because it's like keeping the characters in the beginning of the adventure, the middle, and the end is mind-bogglingly tough. Because if you have 3 people writing it, you need one person to go in and rewrite those sections to make sure it connects correctly, which I found out.
So Kanta super chatted Quantum Leap.
Yeah, it's very Quantum Leap. That's exactly it. That's what this adventure is. It is literally Quantum Leap. Because you're literally leaping to new areas and going on adventure and then leaping back. So we've been going on way too long. I gotta go feed my dogs. Hopefully,
let's end with one super chat from Glade Ribbon, who said Kingmaker PF2 provides a lot of nice Lego pieces to plug into other campaigns.
And so does this. Like, these are very cool set pieces. And as I said, that casino is amazing. Like, I would take that casino and just steal it and do that on my own. I love that. A casino in hell, awesome. With that run by Tiamat, awesome. Eberron, exploring a Titan built into a mountain, awesome. Checking out the Tomb of Wayward Souls, made by the same one who did Tomb of Horrors. Like, you can do all those on your own. You don't even need that. So if you want to mine this for parts, you can use all of those. Those are very cool. The other adventures, they're okay. They're fine. But those three are really the standouts. And one of the things that people have mentioned, there's a lot of... The bestiary is very large, and I guess there's just not a lot of very good high-level monsters. The weird thing is that most of these monsters aren't that high level. Like, okay, there's like a level 11 monster here, a level 8 monster. Like, here's level 13, level 5, level 11, level 7, like level 9. I'm like, okay, I thought this was a high-level adventure. It's like, okay, one level 15, level 6, level 9, level 5. This is an adventure for levels 10 to 20. Why would you have a level? In Pathfinder, you would never fight a level 5. It's like level 5.
That's just how 5e
It's
works.
5e scale system, yeah.
I know scale's different, but level 6, level 10, so there's just not even that many super high level. It's not like there's level 11 to 20 monsters in here. There's actually
all the monsters in the back featuring somewhere in the adventure?
Yes. Most, not all of them, because they do have stats for some of the like the wolf spider, and you might necessarily fight them.
Oh, who appears, but you might not battle.
Yeah, and they're level like 24, and Vecna is level 26 and pretty tough, but they have no legendary abilities, which is a little strange.
Maybe he's using the legendary abilities to cast the ritual that he's mostly paying attention to.
He has actions, bonus actions, and reactions. He's got a ton of hit points. He's level 26. He's at 18 AC, 272 hit points. The main thing is if you attack him with the Rod of 7 parts, it does like an extra 35 points of damage. So that's what if you attack him with the rod, then you start messing him up. So there you go.
Is that stat block reprinted from an earlier source,
No,
perhaps?
it's new. It was redone for this. Let's see. Sorry I was late, but I missed this part. Does anyone know if they're making a SRD for
AD&D 2E? They said just generically that they have reconfirmed that they're going to do it for old editions, that they're working on it, but they didn't say which ones. So we don't know for sure. That could be the minimalist approach of just 3rd edition and 3.5 because they had SRDs in the past being put onto Creative Commons, or it could have 480s and even older than 3rd ones as well. That's unclear. I don't think that I saw anywhere where they named which ones. They just said that they were going to look into it for all of them and getting them up there. So we'll see which ones it winds up being, I guess.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Someone says that it was the same as the Vecna dossier stats.
Oh, was it? I thought it was new. I thought people said
someone said that it was, but I don't know because I haven't seen the Vecna dossier
Well,
ones.
I know Strahd was brand new. But they do have things like they have Tasha in here. They have Tiamat, but they don't have a stat block for her. They have Strahd. Strahd was redone. I know that for a fact. Mordecai, but they don't have his strat. They don't have his stats in here. They have the Wolf Spider. Wolf Spider's nasty at 24 level. Lord Soth is in here. Cass is in here. Cass is level 23. Silverhand is in here. So there's a character dossier. Again, I'm not as familiar with the 5e world as I am with Pathfinder and past versions. So yeah, I mean it's okay. I mean, I want to start rereading all the other 5e adventures. I'll leave it at that. It's that I understand the philosophy is that they basically just put it together in set pieces, and then you have to connect it all. And there's going to be a lot of people who put out helper articles in DM's Guild that really do connect it, and that's very popular. And it's not a bad thing. I mean, but at the same time, I don't know. I'm just so used to Pathfinder adventures and even other third-party adventures that do have connective tissue and just go that little extra step that I just was a little alarmed when I read it like this. But overall, I feel it's... I don't know. I don't know if I would say
my summary of what you told us on this show sounds like it is a set of smaller adventures which run the gamut from a few that one that maybe doesn't exactly work towards good, towards excellent for 3 out of 7 of them, that are hampered by page space and their ability to connect to each other as a cohesive whole.
That is correct.
And you would have wanted to see more in particular from the initial hook as well as the finale.
Yes.
You two have
beginning and end.
You have done a good job. All right. Well, hopefully you guys had fun and I didn't bore you both. But
no, it's good. I haven't been on this show in a little while, but this is certainly up my alley.
All right.
I wasn't sure how much of it would be about this adventure versus about like general principles of adventure design. It looks like we did a mix of both.
Well, we did both. I think we covered it. But maybe what we should do is
I think Steven was planning on doing one segment of one and one of the other, but it blended together because he was mentioning putting timestamps for both of them. But
I think it made more sense because we were discussing that adventure to talk about like when there's an issue, like how does that issue come about? And what are the sorts of challenges? Because you presented in the beginning, you're like, well, these are some of the same folks that worked on Jewel of the Indigo Isles, but like there's some really considerable differences between those adventures and the way that they're structured. So like what causes those kinds of differences?
Yeah, I would love to get Ron and Patrick and Amanda on the show and talk to them because boy, that would be great. That would never happen, but boy, it would be great.
Yeah, there's no way
in the
universe.
No way they'll ever get on the show. They're not allowed. But if I could, I would love to just talk to them. I might be able to get Amanda. Believe it or not, Amanda said maybe as long as the people above let her. But I think just in general,
that means that maybe she would want to, but the answer is no.
Yeah, probably not. But the point is, I would love to have them on the show just to talk about this because I directly worked with them and you know them, so I'd love to talk just what we were doing only from a more specific point of view, which will never ever happen. Anyhow, you know what we should do? We could do a book club. We all read the same adventure and then discuss it. that actually could be kind of fun. There's so many new ones that are coming out too. That actually might be fun, like an adventure book club.
Yeah, the Roll for Combat Adventure Book Club, and go through different design notes each time, see some of the common themes. That could be fun. There's so many things we mentioned on the show as being fun that we never do. But that's another good example.
I actually think I could do, and I think we should do, and maybe even have a guest. I think that would be fun. Maybe once in a while. I have to think of a good adventure to read. I wouldn't want to do mine because I don't want to spoil it. So,
yeah, that makes sense.
And Lord knows I have enough adventures. So, let me think that.
Plus, I mean, it would be an incredibly biased review.
Yes.
No, I can't.
Let me tell you about how my idea for how to make the best adventure is.
It follows all of the Stephen Glicker. It follows all the 10 commandments of Stephen Glicker for a good adventure because it was designed by me, Stephen Glicker.
In the chat roll for book club.
This is a good adventure. People love this adventure. People love it. And people, I wish I could spoil. I want to do a spoiler chat one day because there's people, they're starting now. Enough people are Reddit that people are all starting to say the same things, which is fascinating because they all, God, I can't do it. There's specific story beats that happen in the adventure, and people all react the same way at the story beats, which I find fascinating because I didn't expect that. But every party acts the same way so far. And then the ending, the few people I've been talking to about the ending, it's all over the place, that's nice to see because
that's amazing.
That's what I want to see because people, it wasn't like, oh, I had the same ending. Like everyone's like, no one's were even close to the same. The endings were totally different, which is what I wanted. I want everyone to have it. And how hard is that to do? As Linda knows, because she had to do it, to have it that everyone could play this adventure and yet have a completely different ending, and have a unique ending to themselves. But we did it, or you did it, Linda. You made the impossible happen.
Tell me more when the stream is off, when you don't have to worry about people being spoiled.
All right.
I want people to experience it fresh for themselves, for sure.
I will.
Shall I do the ending thing?
Yes.
All right, everyone. Until next time, if you want to battle the zoo, you have to roll for combat.